Okay. So good evening, everyone. This is the Tuesday, November 15th, 2022 Town of Monroe Planning Board regular meeting. Noreen, if you'd do roll call. Present.
Here, okay. Jeff Manson.
Here.
Pat Shea.
Here.
Nick Napoli.
Here.
Dylan Penn.
Here.
Louis Rivera is absent, and Robert Garstack.
Here.
Thank you.
With that, we have a quorum and can conduct business. I'd like to point out the fire exits. We have exits all behind you. There is where you came in, the entrance, you can exit that way, as well as there's another one in that direction. With that, can we all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? All right, first item on the agenda is Owen Drive. This is a returning project. Good evening. So why don't you give us an overview of where we are in the process, any revisions that have been made, and then we'll get into comments.
Yes. So good
And
evening.
name for the record. Thank
Good
you.
evening. My name is Joel Mann, Braham and Associates, on behalf of the project in 20 Owen Drive. This is a proposed three-lot subdivision on top of the hill by the end of Owen Drive. We were here probably one or two times about presenting the project. By now, we didn't submit a very detailed, updated plan due to the fact that there is some open questions on the configuration of the road. I got some comment letters there, but I think before the comment letters, and I will start the discussion. We had a meeting, field meeting with Sean and the building inspector. So if you can see on the map, the project, you can see the line around the property. The property line is including the three lots plus the proposed right-of-way. And above the road on the left side to the top, there is a little triangle out that's also part of this property. Actually, there are another three houses having access through that lot. So initially, when I looked at the property, I proposed to extend Owen Drive as a proposed public road and dedicate that portion, even though the triangle to the town. So that way, all the existing homes and together with the proposed homes will have access to a public road. The question that came up that the road continues into Smith Farm, existing development there. And I think we got some comments on that, and I don't think we want to go in that direction to open up the road and to Smith Farm and to connect that development, because that will open up Secret and Smith Farm, and it can turn this project into a very complicated project. So the other options are, or to propose a cul-de-sac. Now, with the public road at the end, you need to propose a cul-de-sac. So the option will be in front of Lot 3 to propose a cul-de-sac. It's doable, but there is a grading issues there, but we can still do it. I didn't have a chance after that meeting to see how it fits in, but it seems to be that Lot 1 is still big. I can rearrange a little bit the lots. Even I'm going to miss something from Lot 3, I can still have it. The only other problem that came up, and I believe that that Sean has raised, that Village of Monroe owns on drive till that property, then it become private. So now if I'm going to dedicate a public road, the town is going to own the end of a cul-de-sac through a village road. So I'm not sure, and we are not sure how the town board will look at that. So the other option that we had is to not to do a public road, just to do a private road, and that will be the access to the properties. So I think for now we need input from the board members and the consultants from the planning board on which direction to take, and based on that we will revise the plans.
All right, so with that, Sean, our planning board engineer, if you would provide your comments?
Sure. So I just want to kind of focus on the road as Joel's kind of laid out for you, since that's kind of the key element at this point, because, you know, obviously there's three options as Joel laid out. One is town road, and if the board would like to proceed with the town road, it should be referred to the town board to understand if they would be willing to accept dedication of that road. If it's going to be a town road, it will need to meet the town road specifications, which include a turnaround at the end of the proposed roadway. But as Joel pointed out, the proposed extension of Owen Drive will be from a village roadway to a 500-foot length section of town roadway that the town highway department would have to travel through the village to this very short section of roadway to be maintained. Does that make sense? In my mind, probably not. So then the second option would be to have the access solely from Smith Farm. Now that portion of roadway is currently one of the emergency accesses to Smith Farm that's supposed to be gated. So from that perspective, there's two options. Either open up the gate and have that a through road, which from a traffic perspective would have to be reevaluated from SECRA, because now you're going to have a whole bunch of traffic going through Owen Drive into that neighborhood. Or have that continue to be gated, except maybe move the gate towards Owen Drive so the homes are accessed through Smith Farm, so the only access to those proposed three homes is through Smith Farm. Then the last option would be to have a private road that the three homeowners would own and maintain. When we discussed it briefly with Ben, I don't know if he made a full determination, but it sounded like a cul-de-sac would not necessarily be required from a fire code's perspective, since it would be connected to Smith Farm. If there was an emergency at one of these three homes, they would access it through Owen Drive onto the private road portion, which then the fire trucks would just exit through Smith Farm through the emergency gate, therefore not requiring a turnaround. So at this point, I really think it's up to the applicant and the board to see which alternative they would prefer to see.
Why don't we go through the rest of the comments?
Sure.
I think we're absorbing this right now, so
Yeah,
I don't know
yeah,
we're going to have an
understood.
answer this
Okay.
evening for that.
Yeah. So from the zoning bulk perspective, it appeared that that all of the lots seem to meet the requirements of the URM zone. Except I just asked Joel to provide the net lot area calculation, so that could be confirmed.
There is on the map, on every lot, the net lot area is on every lot.
It's on every lot, okay.
It's on the site plan.
So if you could just add that to the table.
Okay.
We went through the roadway. The water has been revised to be individual wells for each one of the homes. Previously, the narrative had identified public water to be proposed, which the only public water in that area is from the village. A SWIP will be required since the disturbance is greater than 1 acre as proposed. The applicant should meet the requirements of the tree preservation law and the zoning code. And the applicant should be aware of the issues raised in the Village of Monroe's attorney's letter and the village planning board engineer's letter from November 2nd and October 27th. That's all I had at this point.
Thank you. Ashley, our planning board attorney, do you have any comments?
That work? Okay. So from a seeker perspective, you did previously declare your intent to be lead agency. The notice was circulated on October 4th, so you would be able to assume lead agency status this evening, assuming no objections have been received. I think really this road question is kind of a threshold issue that you're going to want to address before moving forward. A few other additional comments. The EAF did say that it was an archaeologically sensitive area, so the plan should be submitted to SHPO. The entity disclosure form needs to be filled out. There was a section that was blank. And this is a major subdivision because it proposes a new road. So major subdivisions require the applicant to comply with the cluster provisions of the code. Unless this board waives them, you could waive them for subdivisions involving less than 5 acres, which would be, this is, I believe, 3.
So with that, I will turn to the planning board comments, planning board for comments, and I'll start to my left. Any comments?
Comment.
Jeff?
No comment at this time.
Okay. Couple of things. So if this were a private road, I know there's a limit on the total number of lots. So the 3, I believe, would meet that, but I just want to.
3 lots that are proposed would meet the private road requirement, as the private road regs allow up to 4.
Okay.
However, we should look at it, or we should get a determination from Ben, since that there is an existing private road with other homes accessing. So would the number of lots be restricted because of the existing other 3 homes that are accessing from that private road?
So then there may be a limit as a result, depending on
Correct.
what the interpretation is. But
Exact-
we'd have to ask Ben if it's determined that it's a private road.
That's correct, because the other 3 homes, really, the road, it doesn't meet the private road specifications that those homes are accessing from. So would the limit apply to those other 3 homes is really the question that we need to get from Ben, so.
In terms of drainage, I think we'll have to look at that because the back of the property is sloping. It's my understanding that Smith Farm had drainage issues in general that had to be taken care of. And I think, given, again, this is slope property, that may be the same issue, especially for the downhill property owners. Also, as a general comment, when I see the retaining walls, I'm not in favor of that. I think ultimately, from my perspective, and I believe in the zoning regulations, we've talked about terrain adaptive housing, making sure that the housing is contoured to the land. And so I think at one point, I thought the retaining wall was around 13 feet, if I'm correct.
Possible, yeah. The problem is the whole property slopes down from front to back much more than allowed for exposure based on the height calculation. So I've tried to, you can see I've tried to preserve as much as I could from the back of the property. After the retaining wall, I want to preserve and not touch it at all. I can technically regrade everything, and then I might be able to avoid the retaining wall. But I think that will be better to leave the existing vegetation there.
Or if the house stepped down, instead of creating single footprint type houses, there might be alternative options in terms of, again, building it into the slope.
Can look at like and make a bi-level house, like in.
Yeah, something that, again.
Split level, actually.
Split level or something that is, again, you know, it's not a standard fare house. It's something that is adapted to that particular sloping condition.
So it can pick up more slope from the front to the back of the house and maybe lower the grade in the back and reduce the height of the retaining wall. That's,
Right.
I got
Right.
it. Well,
And then because 13 starts to get a little, here we have, it starts at 4, it looks like 793 to 797. But then we continue on, and here's 8 feet. What about 8 feet? And then I thought somewhere actually it said 13. 6, 8. Right, that might have been an older plan, perhaps I was looking at. But even so, that's, you know, that's fairly sizable. The other thing is, you know, maybe to do it as split retaining walls and then
steps.
having vegetation that is in between the two might be another option. But I think we're trying to avoid the amount of grading that's happening. Because one of the things that we see is, you know, in terms of the view shed, we want to be able to screen the houses to some extent. And, you know, we just don't want to see all the houses sitting up there and opening up views,
right.
you know, or at least open up partial views. So drainage I mentioned, retaining walls I mentioned. We said we're going to be on individual well, but we're going to be connected to sewer?
Sewer.
Okay.
Yes. There's no sewer main extension required. We have a sewer main just next to the property.
Okay. And should we bring up the letters that the village had submitted to us just for informational purposes? You have those letters, right,
Yes.
Joel? Ashley, do you think we should bring those up or get a summary of
Or if you
what?
wanted to reference them or summarize, there was, I think, 3. There was an initial email with some comments back when the lead agency notice was circulated. That was followed up with a letter from the village attorney and then also a letter from the traffic engineer for the village.
So I have the attorney's letter up, and, you know, we said that they're an interested agency. Is there anything in this design that ultimately is triggering them to be an involved agency, or not at this point?
I think it depends on the road
Okay.
they're going to connect to, yeah, really the status of the road there and whether it's going to open up the Smith Farm approvals in any way.
That was the other thing I was going to mention. I think if we could clearly get labeled on the map the town boundaries versus the village boundaries, and where it's kind of village going into town, to be clear on that.
Sure.
And you know, who's responsible. So it seems that most of their comments relate to road, Smith Farm, access, and certainly because it was approved with an emergency gate, there was not an intent to have traffic coming out Owen. And so that would really, if that were to change, that would be significant. And so while we were talking about options, to me, in the best of all worlds, we keep it as, you know, as gated. I don't see the need for anything to be opened up. Whether they ultimately access directly from Smith Farm and move the gate, from my perspective, that would still control traffic. And in fact, you would take 3 homes off of Owen.
Actually, the alternative I had suggested to Joel in the
Yeah.
meeting, so.
Yeah, so that might be acceptable to the village, but ultimately, we need to get their input as far as the options themselves. So I think, in as much as we can opine here, I think we need the village to opine as well, and then we need to find out from the town board whether or not they would even be willing to accept a public road. So those are my comments at this point in time. Pat, do you have comments?
I have a question or clarification on the cul-de-sac issue. Okay, under which scenario would a cul-de-sac be required?
if the proposed roadway extension would be dedicated to the town.
But that's a situation where we'd have to go through the village in order to get there?
Exactly. So Bonnie, if you could pull up the map. Very left of where Lot 1 is, essentially that's the village and town boundary. So the village road ends right where the property starts, so that from that point to where the end right there would be, that would be the only section of town roadway in that area, which a town plow truck would have to drive all the way through the village in order to just plow that 500-foot section of road.
That happening?
Yeah.
Is there,
That would be,
Maybe-
the road
maybe-
in the village is public, correct?
maybe it's a question more to the town board, but from your perspective, is there an option to make a maintenance agreement, even though it's a public road, that should be a maintenance agreement that the property owners are responsible for snow plowing? That's the daily stuff? Or
I would say I don't know if there would be an option if the homeowners were responsible, if that was a town road. However, I've seen agreements between towns and the county that the town maintains a portion of a county road. So perhaps the town could work out an agreement with the village for the village to maintain that
That
portion of the road.
then it involves the village too. So.
Correct.
No other questions for me?
Thank you. Any questions?
None.
None, Dylan? Okay. Rob, any questions? Bob? Okay. So with that, the one action we can take this evening is to declare ourselves lead agency, as no other agencies objected. So I will make a motion that we declare ourselves lead agency. May I have a second?
So moved.
Pat seconds. Noreen?
Bonnie Franson,
Aye.
Pat Shea,
Aye.
Dylan Penn,
Aye.
Jeff Manson,
Aye.
Nick Napoli.
Aye.
He doesn't vote. Okay.
All right, so I think with that, we still have a lot of homework to do in terms of the road. And the other thing we have to think about is the cluster. I don't know that there's any benefit to clustering in this location because of the small parcel size. And most of the houses there are single-family. So I don't know that we would want to cluster, but I think we need to just address that at the upcoming meeting and give that some thought in terms of, could you acquire some open space and that the town would control, same amount of development, but in some way maybe controlling an area that, would remain treed because the town controls it. But we might be able to do that through other means, so we'll give that some thought.
Okay.
All right?
So the question is, regarding that road question, what is my next steps in order to have the board or the town board to get a decision on that? So is there any type of materials that you want me to provide, like I should put the 3 options on a map? It should start here. You want to make an informal meeting with the town board?
I think we need to have an informal meeting, maybe, not just maybe, with the town board or with members of the town board and actually reach out to the village board and get everybody together in terms of what makes sense for development up there. That would be reasonable. And again, I think preserving that emergency access in the best of all worlds.
Okay.
So we will set something up. And in the meantime, if you could provide, though, a map that, again, labels the town and the village
I will
boundary.
provide an overall map that have it like a bigger area that shows clearly the boundaries, and I will provide a map from the 3 options that's
Yeah.
basically on the
That's what I was
table.
going to suggest. If Joel was able to sketch the 3 options that we could lay out for both the town board and the village board, I think that'd be helpful.
Right.
Yeah.
And
that
for the
will-
planning board members to see it.
Right.
All right, that would be my recommendation.
Okay.
Any other thoughts? Anything else think you need in terms of that mapping? No? Okay.
Okay, that makes sense.
All right. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you very much. Have a good night, everyone.
Have a good night.
Aye, Joe.
Right, so next item on the agenda is, continuing application Pilati Village, 98 Harriman Heights Road, if you would all come on up. And I do have a PowerPoint presentation here, so I can open that up. Get this set up.
Symbol at
window?
the bottom, see what, next to the zoom, to the left of the zoom out.
Okay.
No, to the left of the zoom out.
Okay.
Yep.
That's still giving me the no. Oh, sorry, okay, I'm only seeing it on my viewer. All right, before we start, I was just going to have an opening statement and ground rules for this evening. So the next item on the agenda is this public information session on the Pilati Village project. This is not something that's required by the planning board, but we felt it was important to get the public's input because we ultimately are the lead agency responsible for the environmental review of this process. So before we begin, I want to explain the purpose of the information meeting, what it's about and what it's not about. So the applicant has petitioned the town board to apply the Conservation Cluster Residential Floating Zone to this property under Article 21 of the zoning code. And the town board has referred the proposed master development plan, which you'll view this evening, to the planning board for review and recommendation, and the planning board is also acting as lead agency, meaning we're are responsible for the environmental review of the project. In addition to the town board approval of the CCR residential floating zone, the project's also requiring approval of a site plan, a local wetland permit, and subdivision plan approval by the planning board. So the purpose of this information session is twofold. First, a presentation will be given by the applicant in order for the public to get information on the project. And then following the presentation, the public will be given an opportunity to ask questions and then provide comments and your thoughts on what you're viewing this evening. So we'd also especially like to get any comments on what you perceive might be environmental impacts, because that's especially our role in this process. It's not the town board's role, it is the planning board's role to do the analysis to make sure that any potential impacts are mitigated in this review process. So this is a fairly large crowd, and I'm sure you all wish to speak and we want you to speak and have that opportunity. So to do this in an orderly fashion, the ground rules are going to be, we don't have a sign-in sheet, so I'm just going to ask people to raise their hands, and I'll go down the rows on my left and then on my right. And so if you want to come up and speak, just raise your hand, and you can come up to the podium. Before making your comment, just please identify yourself and give yourself and provide your address. And just spell your name slowly because it's part of our meeting minutes that Noreen puts together, our planning board secretary. Please address all your comments to the board, not to the applicant. You address it to us, and then we will follow up in terms of requesting additional information or having the applicant clarify or any of the comments that you may have. Please be courteous. We respect you. We want civility at these meetings. So just respect the process and be civil, and we all want to hear from you. Comments will be limited to 5 minutes per person. We'll see how that goes, if there's additional time at the end of the meeting, if it doesn't go long. If someone wants to raise another question, we can do that, but let's let everybody first have an opportunity to be heard. So we've established a 5-minute limit. And again, I think if an issue has been raised already, don't feel that you have to raise it again. If you want to reinforce it, just say, I have the same comments on traffic as, I have the same comments on drainage as, so you can reinforce that that's a concern or an area of concern, but don't feel that you have to repeat the same comments. You know, we need to address them all. And that's about it. So I think with that, we will open it up to the applicant to introduce themselves and to provide a presentation of the proposed project.
Super, thank you, Chairwoman, I appreciate that. Good evening, everybody. My name is Michael Morgante. I am the project engineer for this project and application. It's before the Town Planning Board, and the Town Board is known as Pilati Village, located off of 98 Harriman Heights Road in the town of Monroe. I'll need you to click the next slide. So the parties that are involved in this project are the Sisters of Charity, Parish Property Management, Rockabill, and Affordable Housing Concepts. And just to give you a little bit of background, the Sisters of Charity Housing was founded in 1998. It's community-based, not-for-profit. It's dedicated to developing, managing, and advocating for affordable housing for the elderly and the homeless and homeless households. They own and provide support services in over 1,000 units in New York. Parish Property Management is also a co-developer. They've been founded in 2003 and have built a management portfolio that includes hundreds of religious and education properties throughout the U.S. They serve clients in the private industry, but also work closely with many other religious orders. Rockabill, also founded in 2007, has been involved in the development of over 12,000 units of affordable housing with costs in excess of $1.5 billion. They specialize in the financial structuring of affordable housing projects through issuance of low-income housing tax credits. And then Affordable Housing Concepts has over 40 years of construction experience throughout the tri-state area, and they'll advise on the design and also be responsible for construction of the project along with the project budget and schedule. So as everybody can see, we have a pretty deep and experienced team assembled as a part of this project. You need one more, yep. So this project is currently located in the RR1 zone on Harriman Heights Road. It's near the Mansion Ridge Golf Course and Sapphire Elementary School. As the chairman had noted earlier, it's proposed for inclusion within the CCR floating zone to permit this type of development. The project's situated in about 89.18 acres owned by the Palatine Sisters, the Catholic Apostolate. The project will be constructed in 2 phases. The first phase will consist of senior housing on the southern side of Harriman Heights Road, which will be 88 one-bedroom units and 12 two-bedroom units. And then the second phase will be on the northern side of Harriman Heights Road. It will consist of 2 multifamily buildings with 24 one-bedroom units, 24 two-bedroom units, and 12 three-bedroom units. Also included in the second phase will be 18 townhomes that will consist of 6 two-bedroom units and 12 three-bedroom units. And as a part of this project, it's also proposed to construct a town soccer field with the second phase as well. So again, the site's located off Harriman Heights Road near Mansion Ridge. There were several convent buildings and other military academies that date back to 1912, which have since been removed approximately 20 years ago. There is currently one convent that's situated on the site to the south, on the south side of Harriman Heights Road, that was constructed in the early 2000s, and the sisters currently occupy that building. There were paved parking lots and there remains that are still there. It's proposed that this development be located where those prior parking lots and housing buildings were located back when they were originally constructed, to try to maintain existing site conditions the best as possible and to provide a sustainable design for the project. There's an existing maintenance garage on the northern side that'll remain and actually get relocated. There's a cemetery on the site, and there are public water supply wells currently on the site, along with 2 existing wastewater treatment plants. The Queen of Apostles wastewater treatment plant is located on the southern side of Harriman Heights Road that the convent currently conveys their sewage flow to. And on the northern side, we have St. Pat's wastewater treatment plant that at this current time only handles flow from Little Pals Preschool. So this is a general map of the master development plan is shown here. If you can see here in this general location, this is where the existing convent is with its associated parking. On the south side of Harriman Heights Road here is where we're looking to propose the senior housing development, which consists of, again, 88 one-bedroom and 12 two-bedrooms. You'll have parking to the rear of that building. You'll have some other parking over here on this side of the building located here. You do have a large New York State DEC regulated wetland in the back over here. Blythea Lake is just over here pointing, where I'm pointing here to the south east. And this site will have 2 entrances located off of Harriman Heights Road, which we have already coordinated with Orange County Department of Public Works. On the northern side, oh, and by the way, the wastewater treatment plant for the southern side is located right in this location here. And on the northern site, it's located right over there, just on the other side of the Vincent Pilati Center. So we will be proposing 2 multifamily buildings that are shown there in that portion of the site. And then just to the left of that, as you come around this side of the site, is where the townhouses will be proposed. And then we have a soccer field here located in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen with its own parking and its own entrance. We are proposing stormwater management areas throughout the site to handle any of the impervious surface runoff. Those facilities have been designed in accordance with New York State DEC stormwater pollution prevention requirements. The town has reviewed this project very thoroughly from many aspects, including traffic, water, wastewater, stormwater, and visual impacts, and so on and so forth. So that's the overall general outline that you see there from the master development plan. So the proposed development, as you had seen before, it'll be served by newly drilled public water supply wells, and the 2 existing wastewater treatment plants that currently have Speedies permits will also serve the development. Both plants are significantly underutilized at this point. The southern side, again, the southern wastewater treatment plant is only handling flow from the current convent that's there. And as I noted earlier, the northern wastewater treatment plant's handling flows only from Little Pals Preschool. So the southern plant is rated at 20,000 gallons per day. The northern plant's rated at 25,000 gallons per day. Both of those plants are probably using 2,000 gallons per day and under currently. So they have excess capacity. That information has been submitted to the New York State DEC, is currently under review also as it relates to those facilities and our contributing additional flow to them. The site, as a part of the CCR zone, one of the major requirements is open space. So this project for phase 1 on the south side will provide 66% open space. That means that 66% of that land will remain open, green in its current state. And for phase 2, we'll have approximately 82% open space. So again, a majority of the site is remaining in its current natural state. You will see just nice new buildings in the background when you drive by, but they will blend in with the existing landscape that's already there. This is 178 units total. We meet the zoning density requirements for the CCR zone. 20% of those 178 units will be restricted to families earning less than 100% of the area median income. 100 units will be restricted to families where at least one person is over the age of 55 on the senior housing side. And this meets a major market need, not just in Monroe, but in general in Orange County and beyond in the Hudson Valley. It meets a market need for senior and mixed housing, which will be designed with sustainable design principles that include, as we mentioned earlier, reutilization of existing roads, driveways, parking areas, and building pad locations. We're reutilizing the existing wastewater treatment plants for sewage disposal. We are providing ample open space as noted above, and we've got stormwater facilities in accordance with New York State DEC regulations. The proposed development is also located in close proximity to the village of Monroe and Harriman, which is one of the requirements of the CCR floating zone. It's located on one parcel of land currently that will ultimately be subdivided for the convent, the proposed buildings, and a town soccer field. We're maintaining the floor area ratio of 0.063, which is below the maximum allowable of 0.07, and by the way, 0.07 is very low itself. And extensive open space is provided that is comprised of landscaped areas, lawns, and areas that will remain in their natural wooded state. Visual screening is provided throughout both phases through the preservation of existing vegetation and proposed landscaping. And we're looking to propose or maintain as many of the existing stone walls on the site as possible. That kind of concludes my general overview and presentation of the project. I'd actually like to turn the microphone over now to Bill O'Connor, who is going to discuss more of the business side of the project.
Thank you. Typically, my presentation wouldn't begin until the town board meeting, but as you can see, the town arranged for this special informational meeting just to give you all a little sense as to what our purpose and intents are. We are not-for-profit developers. We work typically with not-for-profits, in this case with the Palatine Sisters, who I'd like to welcome here tonight for their support for the project. They've had a 100-year legacy here in town, and our goal is to preserve that legacy by building something that is a community-based project. As you can see, we're developing a new soccer field. This will have a parking lot and also access to a clubhouse that can be used for various events. We want the community to be able to participate in that along with our new residents. As we pointed out to you, we are applying for state subsidies for this in order to basically build affordable housing. We want our seniors to be able to live in a clean, affordable development, get some of the support services. We are looking to house frail elderly, people who really need some support in order to maintain, to live. You all see the commercials about a place for mom. We want a place for mom, dad, grandma, grandpa. That's our primary interest in the southern side of the town. On the northern side of Harriman Heights Road, we're looking to construct a family-based project. We're looking to gear more towards moderate income, workforce housing, teachers, cops, firemen, blue collar, that type of thing. And again, our goal is to make it affordable. And once we get through this next step in the process, we're going to pitch our applications to the state of New York to fund the project. Again, we just want to give you a little bit of a background now. Hopefully when we get to the town board meetings, there'll be more information about exactly what this is. But we're going to start out trying to make these available to local people first. That's going to be our first goal. And with that, I'd like to end our presentation and turn it over to the planning board. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, we'll begin the public comment period of this. So I'm going to go, again, row by row. So on my left side, first row, would anyone like to speak? I'll get around to the perimeter after I go through the rows. First row, no one's raising their hands. Second row, anybody? Please, if you'd come on up. And again, state your name for the record. If you'd spell your name, address for our minutes, we'd appreciate it.
Matthew Ladka, 1345 Orange Turnpike, Monroe, New York, LADKA. My question here is, we have some major projects being presented to the Board of Education, the Planning Board here. One being this one being the Rye Hill Preserve. There's one also by behind the captain's table, and obviously there is the huge ongoing development over in over by the State Troopers Barracks. Traffic is a #1 concern, not only all over Monroe, but definitely in this area, because those 3 developments that I just talked about, they're probably within a, 3-mile area. And here we are where, I don't know the exact numbers, but we're definitely increasing the density of people in that area, and the amount of cars that are going to be there, because we're not dealing with small developments, very large developments. What's going to be done with that? Because I just cannot see the traffic getting any better than what it is right now. As it is, living on Orange Turnpike, I know it's not Harriman Heights, but it's very close, and there are severe accidents constantly on that road. So it's definitely a number one concern. Another concern that I have is, you know, we talk about maintaining this low-income or elderly community over there. Who is going to be in charge of maintaining that to make sure that the elderly do have access to that? What are, you know, why is it going to stay that way? Is it going to be the company that is presenting this? Are they going to monitor and enroll this, or is it going to be some outside agency brought in to make sure that they're living up to what they're proposing here, actually on both sides? Those are two comments and concerns that I have.
Thank you for that. So I'll just real quick say that there is a traffic study that's been prepared for this project. All the traffic studies that we review, the applicants are required to build into their analyses background traffic, what we call no-build traffic. So anything that is proposed under construction is included within that if it's within the traffic shed that's being analyzed. Captain's Table, that project, we do not have control over. That's in the Village of Monroe, just so you're aware. Over by the police barracks, we have no control over those projects because it's in the Village of Curious Shoal. But obviously we have control over the projects that we review, including Rye Hill, which is in front of the town right now. And ultimately, though, when we do our environmental review process, we have to look at all the traffic in the area, regardless of where it's located. So, yes, so I just wanted to touch upon that in particular. Let me go to the next row, and then if you have more comments, we could come back up again. Third row, please come on up. Good evening.
My name is William Dutcher, D-U-T-C-H-E-R. I live at 265 Harriman Heights Road, and my main concern is water. We currently are on wells down towards Village of Harriman from the project, just below the school, and I'm worried about our well situation if you're going to be pumping out water for 178 homes up.
Okay, thank you. I'll just ask Sean to touch upon this briefly. We did ask the applicant to submit a hydrogeologic analysis.
Correct, which has been submitted. The water quantity has been submitted to the town's hydrogeologist for review. We have not heard back from the hydrogeologist yet, and I believe we're still waiting on the water quality results of that report for the hydrogeologist's review.
That information is available. We are studying it as part of the environmental review process, so be aware that that is being studied. Okay, I'll touch upon that after. Third row still, please, come on up. Good evening. You could speak a little into the mic because you might not. And I actually heard it. I didn't know if our planning board secretary heard it.
115 Ludlam. Just a question. The storage, the waste, what's there now? They had said the capacity was good, or, you know, they could deal with it, but what would be coming in? How quickly does something like that fill up? And in the case it does, what happens?
Okay.
That's
So there are two existing sewer treatment plants there. They have applied to the New York State DEC to amend those speedies permits, which are the permits for the wastewater treatment plants to discharge to where they currently discharge, which the applicant has submitted to DEC and is dealing with comments and revisions pursuant to the DEC's review. Those modifications have not been accepted by DEC permit, but the applicant is working towards getting those accepted by New York State DEC.
So New York State DEC is the permitting agency. We don't issue permits for that, but that is, again, part of the environmental review process, which is why we've had them examine wastewater. So that's part of the analysis that we're waiting to hear back on. Anybody else in row 3? And again, I can come back down. I can come back. Row 4. Anybody come on up? Good evening.
And 190. I have the same concern about well water, because I'm on well too.
Okay.
I don't know if this is a stupid question, but like 3 years from now, because I know they're using the existing wells, but I'm assuming the residential is going to use more water than the schools and stuff that were there previously. So is there any guarantee that 3 years from now, if my well dries, is someone going to be responsible for that?
So they're not looking to reuse existing wells. They're proposing new wells for each of the public water supplies that will be permitted as part of this application.
But they said they were going to use some of the existing wells also.
Mike, could you clarify that? Are you?
Actually, Mike, I don't know if it might be useful to just continue to sit on up here in case. Yeah, we'd appreciate that.
So we've drilled 2 new wells on the northern side, and we've also drilled 2 new wells on the southern side. Those wells, the pumping tests have shown that we have more than adequate capacity to supply water for our project. Any of the drawdown that was observed during the pumping test was absolutely minimal. There's no indication whatsoever that the amount of water that we would require for our project would impact any of the neighboring properties in their wells.
You did a 72-hour pump test?
Yes, we did a 72-hour pump test.
Okay. So maybe explain for the benefit of the public what a 72-hour pump test does and what the rate is that it's...
We actually have our project hydrogeologist here tonight,
Oh, okay.
Jack Palmerton, so I can pass the microphone to him if you'd like to discuss that with the public. Want to come up?
That'd be great.
We also have our traffic consultant here as well tonight.
Okay, great.
I just want to add that we're drilling new wells because we think they'll be better. We are abandoning the old ones, so it's not like we're going to be adding new wells.
Hi, my name's Jack Palmerton. I'm with Hydro Environmental Solutions, and we're the project hydrogeologist. So we performed our 72-hour pump test, which is a requirement by the state and what the county wanted. We did a 72-hour pump test for the 2, so we did a simultaneous 72-hour pump test for both the 2 wells on the northern side of the site and 2 wells on the southern side.
The simultaneous meaning all 4 pumped at the same time?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. However, we started each well an hour separately. So like we started the first well at 10 and then second one at 11, so on. So we did that for 72 hours. We did off-site monitoring. We went around to multiple houses around the site, the north side, the south side, the west side. And we got pretty good coverage. We didn't see any off-site effects during the 72-hour pump test, and we did the water sampling at the end of the 72-hour pump test. The labs are kind of slow with the turnaround time, so we just got those lab results in, and I just compiled those today, actually. So.
Okay, so we're going to be getting those soon?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
So I think the points are, we did a 72-hour pump test, so that's continuous, correct?
Exactly.
So that would be pumping at all hours of the day. So, you know, there's sometimes concern that if you do it at a certain time of the day, a pump test, you're not capturing when everybody's either washing or, you know, showering, et cetera. So it's done continuously. And it was all of them at the same times to represent as if all that water was being used the entire project.
Exactly.
And then, of course, we check we checked adjoining wells to see if there was drawdown, which would speak to a couple of the individuals were concerned about how their wells may be impacted. That's why we monitor off-site at nearby adjoining wells to see what the effect is. And then water quality, we're still waiting to hear, because once you start to pump or suck out that much water, sometimes it draws in constituents, and we want to understand the water quality implications. So that was done.
Correct. I just wanted to clarify also what the pumping rates were on each of the wells and how that compares to what the ultimate use would be from each well?
Yeah, so the 2 wells on the northern side, we both pumped at 8 GPM. The 2 wells on the southern side, the 2 wells on the north side, we pumped at 8 GPM. And the 2 wells on the south side, we both pumped at 6 gallons per minute.
60?
6. Yep.
Gallons per minute. 6 and 8.
Yep.
Okay. Next commenter in that row? We're on 3? Oh, 4, sorry. Here, you need to come up to the mic and then state your name and address for the record. Thank you.
Dutcher at 265 Harriman Heights Road.
Okay.
Dutcher, D-U-T-C-H-E-R. And I was just hoping what you just I'm sorry.
It's okay.
What you just described sounds like it works well for the facility being built, but I thought, and I'm no expert on aquifers, but they can be, from here to there could be 2 completely different aquifers. So how can I be confident that it's not going to impact the aquifer that my well is on?
Yeah, so the aquifer that we drilled in was actually a very good aquifer. We went to surrounding houses, which I believe for the southern side, we did a lot of houses on that south side of Blithia Lake. To the north side, over by Circle Drive, I believe those are completely separate aquifers, as we did not see any drawdown effects while pumping on site.
Okay. Is your well working adequately now? Okay. So you don't have issues at this point in time? Okay. No, understood. Thank you. All right. I think we were on the 4th row. Anybody else from the 4th row? 5th row. Oh, sorry. Was that the 4th row? Sorry, ma'am. Hi, sir.
Avenir Struga, 60 Peter Bush Drive. My concern regarding this new build-out is, number one, I have 4 years living in town of Monroe. I love the town. It's very nice, very beautiful, peaceful nature. My son loves it. I work in the city every day, and I can't wait to come every day in Monroe at this time. I don't want to find another New York City in the town of Monroe, especially with this new build-outs. I know very well the professionals here. I know what low-income buildings are because I do those every day in New York City. I know what low-income buildings bring for the neighborhoods. So I would like to ask a question. What can we do to keep town of Monroe on the condition that was 4 years ago when I came? Because the last 4 years has been changing a lot for negative, not for positive. Include pollution, traffic. If you go on the malls, they're not as clean as they used to be before. In 4 years, with the same population, maybe with 10 or 100 more. What about with, how many people are coming on this development? How many people? 178 units. How many people? Well, you should know. Well, maybe 300. No, I think it's way more than that. You're not building for 300 people.
Right. We're building on the senior side, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom units, but Presumably, the people who are going to be living there are going to be 55 or older.
Where these senior citizens are coming from?
Here, please direct it to us.
Oh, I'm
Thank
sorry.
you. That's okay.
Would you like me to finish?
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. On the family side, we're building 2 and 3 bedroom units, so I can't tell you exactly the number of people, but I believe you can do the math based upon what that is.
All right, based on my math, I don't think...
Please, I'm sorry,
Ah.
please don't call out. Again, we want to be respectful and civil. Thank you. You can always come up here and provide your comments. Don't interrupt the speaker. Thank you. Sorry, go ahead.
So what I'm saying right now, my math is way more than that. It's way more. And I don't think this area will be able to afford the type of traffic, people, and I don't think it's enough space and territory for that amount of people to come in. Whoever had this idea is a very wrong idea. I would like to have that, save it as a picture than a reality. It's going to be a very big mistake, especially for Monroe.
Thank you.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. To the individual's comments, is the housing going to continue to be operated or maintained or managed by the sisters?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. The Sisters of Charity actually operate over 1,000 units of affordable housing. There is actually a recently completed project in Nanuet, New York, which you could go visit so you could understand exactly how these things operate. It's quite bucolic. It fits into the existing design, but we're required under state law to manage the place for 50 years, professionally manage it, to answer your question earlier, to make sure that the buildings are maintained, that the seniors who are there have access to the infrastructure, and that's the short answer, that yes, it will be professionally maintained. That's a requirement under the program to which we apply.
And those are all the housing units, all the programs?
All the housing units have
Okay.
to be professionally maintained.
This is all going to be then managed by
The
the sisters?
operator will be the Sisters of Charity. Unfortunately, the nun who's the president of that hurt her back. She wasn't able to be here tonight. They operate a lot of these places. We're happy to tell you where the most recent ones are so you can look at. And they're far different from what that other gentleman said exists in the city of New York, which are high-density, low-income housing. This is affordable housing, and it's intended to be built in more of a suburban type of sprawl.
Thank you. Next hands, row 4 or 5. I saw someone with the red. Hi.
Hi, my name is I live at Barnett condominiums. My question to you is, in this information sheet that we got, it says something about a soccer field being built, and that's a great thing. My kids played soccer. But you got seniors that are going to be living there, and hopefully maybe that could be more of a recreation park center. I know you said something about a rec building, but people like to be outdoors, walk around, have space. My other concern is the cluster zoning that is a biggie. Buildings to a minimum height so that we don't get encroached with 5- and 6-story buildings, take away our views and the beauty of Monroe. And that gentleman said he's here 4 years. I'm here better than 60 years. So I have seen a lot of changes, believe me. It's still a beautiful town. Let's try to keep it that way. Thank you.
Thank you. So to speak to building height, what is the maximum stories? What are the stories of each of the building?
We're meeting the bulk requirements. Can you bring the master development plan up again? It should be on there. So if you zoom into the zoning bulk table, I think it should probably be just above. Those are parking calculations. So yeah, just a little bit further up. Yeah, so if you see, there it is, table of zoning requirements right there. So I believe, so for our maximum heights, it should be on there. I believe we're at like 35 or 40 feet for the senior building. And likewise for the multifamilies. If you bring up the architecturals, it'll actually be, the heights will be on there, the exact heights. So, yep, architecturals of renderings. So if you go to the Pilati architectural drawings on the right-hand side, if you go to the second sheet, we should be able to see what the building heights are there. So if you go down to the bottom right on the first sheet, you should see dimensions there. The first one was a senior building, correct. Yeah, so average height there is 36 feet roughly. And then if you go to the multifamilies, you should see the same. And it's also worth noting that the multifamilies are set back very, very far off the road. There's a good chance the multifamilies, you won't really see them unless you're absolutely trying to find them. Because as you're driving by the frontage on Harriman Heights Road, you've got those rock outcropping rolling hills there, and there's all those trees, the stone wall, that's all remaining. These buildings are located very far in the back. The condos, we've kept them with their front yard setbacks according to whatever the zoning code requires. But we have a tremendous amount of landscaping involved with this project also. Your landscaping consultant has given this project a very, very thorough and extensive review. The landscaping on this project is going to be outstanding when it's done. So I think it'll blend into the natural landscape as we have the multifamily buildings in the back, plus the townhouses on the left-hand side. Almost most of the mature trees in the front of the senior building are remaining. So there's going to be a lot of character to this site.
Right, I know Calla, who's the town's landscape consultant, there is a landscape architect for the town that's ensuring that it's heavily landscaped, the site. So the town, so this is a multifamily building, but those are faux gables up in the...
Correct.
Right.
That's
So,
right.
so don't let the gables up on the roof confuse you. These are 2 stories. Those are for aesthetics. And then the townhouses are also 2 stories. And then the senior is 3 stories, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I also wanted to then touch upon the resident indicated needs for senior recreation programming. So what is built into the site plan at this point in terms of, so we have the soccer field, which is great for town youth, but what's being provided for the residents themselves? There's a lot of open space on the property. What's programmed?
Thank you for that lead-in. First of all, the soccer field is appearing on the northern side, which is the family side of the complex. The southern side, which is where the senior is being built, we tried to maintain as much open space as possible, also to provide as much natural screening. The buildings are strategically located on the existing footprints of the buildings which are taken down. The southern side is basically following the footprint of what used to be St. Patrick's Academy, which was a taller, candidly more obtrusive building. This is going to take advantage of that footprint and use all the growth that has come in since the building was taken down, and providing that with outdoor recreation space for the seniors.
Are there any common areas or common facilities within the buildings themselves? I'm not sure for the multifamily, but for the senior project.
Yes, in short. There's going to be many local areas, and we're also maintaining a separate community center on the north side that will be available both to the residents and to the community. But on the south side, all of the common space for the seniors is going to be built within the senior complex.
So the community center is the existing
The
building
existing
there
center
that's there for the
we're acquiring it
sisters.
and doing a use deal with the sisters so that they can continue to use it for retreats and things like that, but also to open it up to the Monroe community.
Okay, so all of Monroe.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. 4 or 5, any more comments? Yes, ma'am. Coming up.
Colonna, that's Jeanne, Colonna, Colonna. And I live at 377 Harriman Heights Road. My first concern would be, we don't know how many people would be moving in, although you did say that some of these units will be 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom. Assumingly somebody who would want that would have children. What effect will that have on our schools, and what effect will that ultimately have on our school taxes? I'm sure that's a concern to many people. My next concern is the traffic, and I know other people have spoken about it, but living on Harriman Heights Road, sometimes I feel like it's already a racetrack. In the 35 years we've been here, it went from being lightly traveled to massively traveled. I wake up in the morning to the sound of cars whizzing past my house. But if I go out to we cut the lawn, you have to dodge out of the way the cars that are going up Harriman Heights Road and pray they don't run you over. It's also a problem getting the existing mail the same way. People drive 50, 60 miles an hour on that road. It's supposed to be 30, but they don't do it. My last concern, and I know we've addressed this several times, is the water. But last summer, we had a drought. Everyone was on water restrictions. It's really great to say they got a great aquifer, but you don't know in our world with climate change what is going to happen. So if the existing population is already using so much water, and now you put in quite a few more people, what's going to happen for the next drought, or the one after that, or the summers going forward? We could all be standing there someday and feeling like we're San Francisco, where we have to recycle everything to hope we can take a shower. And I don't think anybody wants to be in that position. So I have really serious concerns about this. I think we're trying to overpopulate an area. And as far as the traffic, even these wonderful soccer fields, that brings more cars. People have to bring a car to bring their family to play soccer. And either you've got to change who patrols Harriman Heights Road, or you've got to do something. Because right now, I wouldn't want to try and cross it with a baby carriage. Might not make it home. With this, it'll be even worse.
Thank you. Rows 4 or 5, anybody else? Row 6, sorry, I'm on the left still. 6 or 7? Yes, ma'am. Hi.
Hi, my name is Joy Hyman. I live at 64 Shadowmere Road.
Okay.
And I think we're all a little bit concerned about water in and water out. Those numbers for the water testing, I just didn't make much sense to me. But I'm sure there are people in the audience who remember Applecross. Then after Applecross, it was Mansion Ridge. There's always been water issues in our area. So we're not economically deprived, but there are some resources that we have to be very careful about, and water is one of them. We're still very concerned. I don't know how old those water treatment plants are, but I hope that someone is making sure they're up to code today's standards. And we're still very concerned with the fact that they're dumping into Blythea Lake. It's like, maybe no soccer field, dig a lake, and let it dump there. Maybe less building. Maybe there's some place where, that will go. But existing houses, existing wells are right by that lake. So I don't understand why, it's not okay to put it over here, but move it down the road a little bit. So that's my major concern. Traffic, of course, yes, Harriman Heights is already pretty difficult to maneuver. We've been here for
Or if you could speak into
Or-
the,
okay,
yeah,
is
it'll
it on?
turn
Okay.
red.
And I know someone asked about what would happen 3 years down the road, and it was said that the sisters would be managing it, and would that include down the road water issues? So,
Thank you, thank you. Getting to wastewater treatment, what is the treatment train? And are those wastewater treatment plants being upgraded in any way?
Yep, sure. I'd actually like to take one step back before that. Ms. Colonna actually mentioned that we were in a severe drought. I'd like to note that we did our pump testing in the middle of a severe drought. So we ran a pump test during like the worst possible case condition we could have. And it's reassuring to know that there was little, if no, effect to any of the neighboring wells during the monitoring.
Real quick, are these bedrock wells?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so the south side, we have the Queen of Apostles plant. That's known as an extended aeration plant. So basically what happens is, and I'll try to do it as best as I can in layman terms, sewage comes into an influent bar screen where we get rid of a lot of the large debris. You go into basically a settling tank at that point to try to remove some solids. That water then flows into another tank where we actually use biological matter to treat the wastewater, to clean it essentially. And then we have another tank at the back of that, behind that aeration tank, where we actually settle out more solids. We have disinfection after that, and there's basically an outfall that discharges into the New York State DEC wetland buffer at that point, actually just outside of it. It's a typical plant that has been, the technology's been around for 100 years. It's tested, true technology, still around today. We did recently, as a part of this project, have a wastewater treatment plant operator go out there and do a reconnaissance on both plants. The southern plant needed some minor upgrades. We needed to reseed the aeration tank to make sure we had the right biological matter in there. There were some pumps we replaced. They had to clean out some skimmers. It was, at the end of the day, a lot of general routine maintenance for that plant. The biggest item to note was that, and the influent meter. We had to fix the meter on the influent because we kept getting crazy readings. So that was what happened on the southern side. The northern side is essentially what we call a sand filter. And so what happens there is raw sewage comes into basically two giant settling tanks or septic tanks, which remove those solids. And then that water overflows into these sand filters, where water kind of percolates through a sand media, is collected through an under drain underneath that, goes to a pump chamber that's located on the outside of that leach field or sand filter system, and then we disinfect that, and we pump that also across the street, back across Hammer Heights Road, and into the buffer just before the DEC wetland.
DEC requiring any upgrades in general, or it's going to stay the same level of treatment?
We have not heard back yet.
Okay, so we don't know
We
at this
don't know.
point.
I mean, I emailed them last week just to get an update. They said they were close, but I haven't heard anything back from them yet. I made them aware we had a meeting tonight. I wanted to try to get comments back from them before the meeting, but I haven't heard.
Okay. In terms of the effluent and the standard it's required to meet, it has to meet standards to be able to be discharged to freshwater wetlands, or that?
So we have a speedies permit. We have a speedies permit for both plants. The speedies permits have to be about 40 years old, roughly. They've been renewed and upgraded a few times. The DEC right now is looking at this last submittal we made. I think, number one, they're making sure that we do have adequate capacity. I don't think it's a technology issue, because I believe these plants are rated for 20,000 gallons per day on the south side, 25 on the north side. As long as we fall within those ranges, we should be able to meet whatever that current speedies permit is that they have. I don't know if they'll modify that permit. We still have to wait and see what they say.
And again, in terms of ownership and maintenance?
That will be,
Again, the Sisters of Charity are going to be the owners of this property after it's developed. they have a 50-year agreement with the state to maintain it, and along with keeping up any active permits with New York State DEC.
So with the state, the 50 years, that's that the sisters have to own it? They can't sell it to another group, or can they?
They would have to, that would have to comply with New York State rules for financing, but right now there's going to be a 50-year agreement with New York State that the sisters would own, operate it, and maintain it. So if another not-for-profit group were to come in, they would still have to comply with the exact same requirements of the 50-year agreement with New York State.
Okay.
Couldn't be changed to some market rate developer or anything like that. That wouldn't be permitted.
Okay, because of the financing
Because of the
mechanism.
financing.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sure.
Mike, I know we talk a lot here about speedies permits and wastewater, but for the benefit of our guests, would you just mind explaining a little bit more about what that is so they can
Sure.
understand what we're talking about here?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So thanks for bringing that up, Jeff. SPEEDIES permit is an acronym. It stands for State Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. And so what happens is the DEC sets criteria for what your effluent limits are for each wastewater treatment plant. I'd have to, they're in the folder actually, if you want to pull them up, you can even pull them up. But for instance, they would set criteria on what your effluent limits are for total suspended solids, what we call BOD, biochemical oxygen demand, various parameters like that are considered pollutants. So you have influent levels, which are really high. BOD for influent, for a plant like this could be like around 300 milligrams per liter, maybe even 400. And what'll come out the back of the plant, we'd have to see the exact number, but we're probably somewhere in the 5 to 10 milligram per liter range. So those are, to give the public an idea, there's tremendous amount of removals of the pollutants in the wastewater. And you have different types of criteria that we have to measure for. And if she scrolls down a little more, we'll probably find them. So there we go. You probably want to scroll down a little bit more. So this is Queen of Apostles. I saw 20,000 gallons. So here we go. So you can see here for flow, we're permitted up to 20,000 gallons per day. Again, BOD stands for biochemical oxygen demand. Basically, pollutants, biochemical oxygen demand, pollutants will pull oxygen out of the water. And so the more BOD you have, you're going to drain oxygen out of the water, which is going to end up polluting that water, which is going to, you're going to have dead fish, dead aquatic fauna, and so on and so forth. Suspended solids, as you can see here, we have limits for that. Fecal coliform, people have probably heard that word before, so they know what that is. We even have limits on what our pH is permitted to be, settlable solids, and what our chlorine residual is. So we have to chlorinate at the right level so that when that water actually is discharged into the receiving body, it's not more than 0.5 milligrams per liter.
And then importantly, the SPEEDIES permit has monitoring requirements that have to be done
Daily.
at a certain frequency, right?
Yeah, you can see here, so total flow is continuous, that's every day, BOD 5, suspended solids monthly, pH, settlable solids daily. JCO is the current wastewater treatment plant operator there. They're a pretty well-respected outfit in the county. They do a lot of wastewater treatment plants and water plants in the Hudson Valley. And the plants have never been running better since they've taken over. They've done a great job.
Thank you. Anything else? Members, if you want to add to it or ask questions, please feel free. We were, I think, to 6 or 7 of this side. Anybody else? And we'll come around again. All right, so I'm going to start on this side of the room now, or the seated, and then I'll go to the periphery. So first row, second row, please. First row, please come on up. Name and address for the record.
It's a little bit prepared, so sorry in advance.
No worries.
Just capture some of the things.
Thank you.
Jamel Evans, Jamell, 404 Harriman Heights Road. So first, I'd like to say that this potential complex isn't the actual problem. It's simply a symptom of the problems that we've all noticed have been becoming more aggressive over the last few years. Bonnie, and I promise it's not going to be a personal attack at all. I believe you have an environmental planning background. And in your endorsement of Mayor Neil Dwyer a few years ago in the Photo News, you talked about how you talked to Neil regarding concerns around undesirable growth of dense multifamily zoning along North Main Street. And that partly based on those conversations you had, the proposals were stopped, and that was great. You then said that we need to elect Neil as mayor to make sure that the village's land use regulations reflect the consensus and vision of the people who live here. And that's the part I feel is very important and shouldn't be overlooked, because I agree with you 100%. Congestion beyond belief is coming. We know it is. Anyone that drives by Ninninger can't deny the writing on the walls. I think it will be an understatement to say that the impact from those future habitants has not even been factored into the amount of traffic and congestion that we're already seeing. It's just true. Knowing that all this is going to happen, how could we in good conscience be okay with adding on to that at this time without planned infrastructure updates to prepare for this onslaught? Another way of saying that is we do not have the road infrastructure for more projects like this. To the people responsible for building this, I'm not going to talk to them directly, to the people responsible for building this or financially benefiting from this, have you spoken to anyone outside of your circles that actually wants this? Because from what I'm hearing, this isn't something you're doing for this community. This is something you're doing to this community. Plans that are responsible, environmentally conscious, and take maintainable growth into consideration should be the pillars that help to decide if a project like this goes forward. In addition to that, like you noted, think of the consensus and vision of the people who live here. If there was an actual vote for this bill, do you honestly think the people of the area would want it? I think there's an opportunity here to show the people that more intelligent and strategic thinking can happen. If not, then be honest with the people of our area and let them know that one day they'll be living in an Orange County version of Co-op City. Final question to ask is, why isn't this being proposed for an area outside of Monroe that better relates to the multifamily building approach? We clearly already have some of those sections. I'd assume it's because you'd make more money by selling potential tenants on the beauty that you're actively working to take away. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Row 2. Anybody want to come on up? Good evening.
Hi, I'm Matthew Connolly. I reside at 25 Amy Tot Drive. For the record, my name is spelled Connolly. I'm here as the treasurer of the Pine Tree Homeowners Association, representing them tonight on behalf of our HOA. Just to give you a little bit of background, our HOA is a 123-home HOA community that was established in 1971 for the specific purpose of maintaining, preserving, and architectural control of a common recreation area. This recreation area consists of approximately 16-acre parcel with an 11-acre lake and 5 acres of contiguous woodlands that are actually located just downstream from where this development is proposed to. So we have a statement here that we just wanted to express our thoughts to the planning board so that you have our interests protected, good level of due diligence regarding this project that you're reviewing currently. So, excuse me for reading it, but here we go. We come before the planning board tonight to convey our concerns regarding the risk posed by this project, with particular emphasis on the drainage and runoff issues that might arise given the scope of the project. We understand that the planning board has taken lead agency status with regards to the provisions of SECRA and are hopeful that a comprehensive evaluation of all environmental factors will be conducted. We believe that the planning board should deem this as a type 1 action, which would require enhanced due diligence and result in a full environmental impact statement to be issued. Why do we voice these concerns, you might ask? Development maps show that the extent of the proposed development is approximately 600 to 1,200 feet from the stream bed that enters our lake, Pine Tree Lake. This feeder stream is part of the Ramapo River watershed. It flows into Pine Tree Lake and then discharges into surrounding wetlands located nearby before eventually entering the Ramapo River. The proposed area to be developed is at a significant elevation above our lake, approximately 200 feet. So there's a significant change in elevation, I believe, there, and could potentially impact our watershed adversely, given the risk of sediment and runoff during the construction phase. Now, why do I say this? I say this because we have past history with projects that have been developed above our watershed. For instance, we had to sue the Mansion Ridge Golf Course developer, Great Expectations, for damages caused to our watershed. And fortunately, we had a favorable outcome from the lawsuit. However, this required that we had to suspend swimming and other activities at the lake so we could dredge a large amount of silt and runoff that was not properly controlled by the developer. Despite the remediation that's occurred, I would say that our watershed hasn't even fully recovered to the extent where it was before. I talked to former residents of the community who always bragged about how they could swim in the lake and the water quality was pristine. Now we have to treat the lake 3 times a year just to eliminate the weed growth that emanated from the sediment deposit. Actually, I believe if I look at that picture there, that might even be our lake.
Mansion Ridge right over here.
Yeah, but the blue area there?
Yeah.
That is our lake.
Yep, that is. And then the project is over here.
Pine Tree Lakes. So, that's Mansion Ridge. In addition, there was another subdivision that was approved in 2005 called Pine Tree Gardens. Same thing. We had a significant rain event, ended up in runoff of silt before the project could be developed significantly. So, unfortunately, the global warming reality is here and will only become worse in the future. We are hopeful that the Planning Board of Monroe will become our partner and environmental advocate in ensuring that no further damage occurs to our watershed and that all means are taken to ensure the quality of Pine Tree Lake for both current and future residents within the community. Should the planning board or developer be neglectful on this behalf, we certainly stand ready to take all means to protect our community interests. I appreciate your time and also appreciate all the hard work that the planning board does. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Do you want to leave? Would you like to leave that statement with the planning board secretary? She's right there. Thank you. All right. Rows 2 or 3 on the right-hand side. Go ahead, sir. Come on up. Good evening.
Ira Wasserman, 366 Orchard Hill Road. I want to, what is that?
She didn't get your name.
Ira Wasserman, Wasserman, Orchard Hill Road. I wanted to touch on something you mentioned quickly about, will the sisters be able to sell the property to somebody else at some point down the line? Even a purchaser who doesn't need state financing, they could just come on and pay off the finance and buy the project outright?
No, they wouldn't be able to pay off the state financing. It's a 50-year agreement that lasts with the property. And the sisters, if they did have to, if something happened to the sisters where they wouldn't be around and had to sell it, it would have to be another not-for-profit that would have to abide by the state rules.
Thank you. Next, 2 or 3. I'm going to come around the perimeter when I'm done with the rows. Thank you. Good evening.
Bob Ricco, 12 Augusta Court, Monroe, New York.
My question is the fire tanks, because I live in Mansion Ridge, but we have fire hydrants there. Now, a well is not going to support a fire hydrant, so you need a large pump and you need a large tank. Monroe at Mansion Ridge at this point has a 250-gallon tank. This project is actually bigger than Mansion Ridge is. I don't know how many houses. There's 120 houses in Mansion Ridge total, between the townhouses and the houses. And that's a 250-gallon tank. I want to know where that tank is going to be placed, if they need that. I know it's preliminary, but I know they're going to need a tank. Even for sprinkler systems, you need a tank. A well wouldn't do it. Talking about wells, you know, when they did the flow test, did they also analyze the water? Because we've had problems in Mansion Ridge. The water is not great. It's very hard water, and one of the wells was full of magnesium, and they drilled another well. They charged us for it, and they came out dry. My problem is, what I want to know is, was there any water tested?
So
I'm not against development.
Okay.
You know, I'm a retired plumbing contractor, so I'm not against development. It was my game years ago.
Thank you. So fire flow, fire capacity, fire code, and we know that the water quality results just came in, so.
That's correct. So he's 100% correct. We'll need to size some type of fire storage tanks to provide the water capacity for the sprinkler systems for the project. It's my goal to get those water quality results, the pump test results, finalize final report, final well depths, all that stuff, and start working on that shortly. Not to minimize the concern, but if there are any type of, if there's high levels of manganese, iron, sulfur, any of these kind of things that are in the water supply system, they're treatable. We can design a water treatment system to, you know, basically take care of those pollutants or any of those high excessive levels of metals or chlorides, and we can remove them from the water stream. So we will size these tanks ultimately pretty soon. It's going to be required for us when we make our submittal to the health department, and we do expect to have tanks either within the building or possibly exterior to the building, buried in the ground somewhere for fire storage.
So it would either be within a building or buried, but it's not going to be visible?
Correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
So those are the responses to your questions about the fire code. For three-story buildings, are they required to be sprinklered?
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And the and multifamily two-story?
I'd have to double check the building code on that one. I don't remember off the top of my head. I do mostly the site engineering, not as much the interior
Right.
architectural stuff.
I believe since the building is greater than 9,000 square feet, it will, meaning the multifamilies, they will require sprinklers.
Most likely, yes.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Okay. Rows 2, 3, anybody else? Row 4, anybody want to come on up? Please come up. Good evening.
Josh Fino. I live at 98 Ludlam Road. My last name is spelled F-I-N-O. I had a couple quick questions and one comment. For clarity, their flow rate was about 40,000 gallons per day. If you assume 90 gallons per person per day, that project supports about 448 people by that test? Yes, sir. All right.
That's our videographer.
Okay.
Speaking like Oz.
He's underneath the desk.
Yes.
Try not to step on him. So the couple of quick questions that I had, how many parking spaces will there be at this facility? I believe that the property that is there is tax exempt right now because it's a religious facility. Will the new property continue to be tax exempt? And then what happens after 50 years if this group is no longer required to maintain this facility? I think that's everything that I have. Oh, also, when was the traffic study performed? So
Thank
those are my
you.
questions. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so
If we can bring up the site plan again, I think we have a parking table over there so we can see what the tabulation is and give the answer. Right, so we have 156 spaces for the senior housing. We have 141 spaces for the multifamily. And the townhouses, we have essentially 48 spaces. And I think there's some parking spaces for the soccer field as well. If you scroll down just a little more, 66 spaces for the soccer field.
traffic, when was it done?
I'm going to...
I think we have a traffic.
Yeah, I'm going to bring up our traffic consultant for
consultant
that,
here.
Frank Filiciotto.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. Just for the record, Frank Filiciotto with Creighton Manning Engineering, F as in Frank, I-L-I-C-I-O-T-T-O. Traffic study was started in 2020, and obviously we were going through quite a pandemic at that point, and we knew at that point that we needed to calibrate any data that we collected. So we went out and did traffic counts, but we did not just use those traffic counts. We looked at historical data that was available to us, published by the DOT, that's on their website, and we were able to use that historical data to calibrate our volumes up because there was quite a reduction in traffic as a result of the pandemic. So we did that. It was vetted by both Orange County as well as your consultant, AKRF, earlier this year, and we're confident that what we analyzed is representative of what a normal condition is. Mike, did you happen to address the parking comment? I can address that too. Sure. Sure. So in terms of the quantities, we do satisfy the town code requirement for parking for all three components of the development, the townhomes, the apartments, and the senior housing. The town requirement is pretty strong. It's quite conservative when you look at other industry standard data for these types of land uses. We've prepared documentation that shows that the expected demand is going to be quite less than the parking that we're providing. And again, this does not require a variance. We do meet the parking per the code. Thank you.
And then I think there was a comment about the gentleman was calculating the number of persons, kind of backing into it, I think, from either the wastewater generation or the water demand.
I didn't hear that full comment.
Okay.
I think I heard
Because
something.
I think my recollection, it was like 400 or so residents would be within the facility.
I heard 40,000 gallons per day was about 440 people. I'm not sure if that's
Something to that effect, right?
I don't know what those numbers are, but what I can tell you is that in terms of water generation for either water supply or wastewater, what we do is 110 gallons per day per bedroom.
Per bedroom, right.
And that's as simple as the math is. And even at 110 gallons per day per bedroom is generally a conservative number because the average person probably uses more like 50 to 75 gallons a day. And so I think the state health department over the years has worked in a bit of a factor of safety at the 110 gallons per day per bedroom. So the numbers we have here, we're confident in. Again, they've been reviewed by the Orange County Health Department. They've been reviewed by your consultants. They're industry standards. They've worked for 100 years.
Right, and I believe they're conservative.
They
They
are
have
very
a
conservative.
buffer.
That's my point, correct.
Right, okay. 3 or 4, rows 3 or 4, yes, sir.
Hi, Tom Luddington. I live at 79 Brower Road, Monroe, New York. Ludington, last name. I want to recognize Matt Conley, who just stood up for Pine Tree. I can attest to what Matt said. I went to high school with Matt. He was Matty, I was Tommy back then in the 70s, and I lifeguarded in Pine Tree Lake, and it was a pristine lake to swim in back then, and it has changed since then. A lot of the things I want to talk about are, have already been discussed. I'll just review them as you requested. One of the things that wasn't was the sales. How do they control sales to a moderate income? You talked about cops and firefighters. I'm assuming there's a process to go through where with tax returns and things like that to show income. From a financial perspective, we talked about the nuns. We talked about the sisters owning the property. I'm assuming they're going to own this for the 50 years or manage it. Those are questions that I have as well. The ownership of, is it tied to the Archdiocese of New York, the Catholic nuns and that sort of thing? What happens if something goes south with that? I think we need to know more about that. You did address that, but I just want to recognize that, there are concerns about that as well. What would happen to that property if, in fact, they, had financial troubles, as it has in the past, not necessarily with them, but other projects in the region have gone south and have been bought by LLCs and the like. Treated water is another one too I'd like to just emphasize as well. I heard pump chambers and the effluents. I have a pump chamber that pumps my effluents up a hill. Are there going to be generators that are going to support those should there be a power failure? Because if they're not, and you can't tell 100 people or 200 people in a unit to stop using the bathroom like I stop it when the power goes out. I had to get a generator to make sure that does because it's backed up into the house. Now, if it overflows and goes down the river, downstream, into the Ramapo, you're going to have a pretty much bad disaster on your hands. So we'd like to know about the generators. Again, I'll say it again. The numbers, I think you got to review those very specifically. I just did a rough calculation before that. It was 70 gallons per person. You got 100 units on the senior. 2.5 people times that is going to net you about 17,000 gallons. What happens when the empty nesters aren't empty anymore like we've seen over the last few years? Especially with 50 plus people, their kids are moving back with them at an alarming rate, actually. So I think that has to be really looked at. Financial help, we talked about senior housing. Do they have elevators in your senior housing with 3 floors? Just a question, because I may be looking at it.
Yes.
Okay, good. I think that's about it that I have. Again, the pump chambers, are they going to be generated, supported? Yes. Good to hear. And I think that's it. Current technology was another thing you addressed as well. These things have been around for a long time. 100 years, I think the systems you talked about, they've been using that. So it's, so long as you, again, I'll reiterate what Maddie said. Thank you for your due diligence. It sounds like the project is well thought out, and I appreciate your due diligence to make sure it's delivered as presented. Thank you.
Yeah. I think you mentioned, I don't know if we mentioned property taxes, and if it's tax exempt or not. I don't recall. Again, the generators, and then rental versus ownership.
Sure. And I think also a question about the separation of the sisters from the Archdiocese of New York, which I'll just touch on.
Yes.
Excuse me, I was taught by the nuns to project back when I was Billy in the Bronx. Thank you for your well thought out and balanced questions and comments. The first one is these are intended to be rentals, not sales. That's our current intent, but we have to put in the applications again to New York State. So I hope that answers your first question. And the rents are going to be based on what we would consider to be workforce or moderate on the family section. On the senior section, the rents are going to be further depressed to allow seniors to be able to afford it. But we won't know all that until we put in the application to the state, and we can't do that till we get through the local process first. The family section, the design, the state model, is to work with the local community to understand the demand for that type of housing. And that's how we're going to model it. That's your, to answer that question. With regard to the sisters and the ownership, the sisters are a completely separated 501(c) from the Catholic Church. They're obviously canonically tied into the Catholic Church, but they're separately run, they're separately funded. Most of the places that they operate receive state subsidies. So any other, if there, for some reason the sisters are not going to be around in 50 years, they've laicized all their boards. There are professionals who serve on their boards who would hopefully continue their mission and also to foresee the vision that the Palatine sisters wanted for the property. If for some reason that corporation does not exist, in accordance with the state requirements, it would have to be ceded to another similar not-for-profit housing corporation, which is defined by the state. And just to go back to the other gentleman's question about what happens in 50 years, I don't want to sound too arrogant here, but I'm not sure any of us know that. Right now, the intent would be, based upon most of the other models, that the sisters or the successive not-for-profit would probably do another state deal under new parameters to try and keep the intent of those things under which the original vision was. But obviously, I don't know what's going to happen with the state. We just had a new election, but that's currently the intent in the plan. Was there any other questions with regard to you? Oh, taxes. So because it's a not-for-profit, they are entitled to some tax exemption. The model would have to pay for all the standard taxes for the special districts, which the town would assess like they would for anybody else. And then there would likely be some negotiated payment in lieu of taxes with the town because of the not-for-profit status of it. And that's yet to be negotiated. This process comes first, but that's going to be a transparent matter open to public scrutiny and review. Did I capture that?
Just to be clear, so special districts means fire district, school district.
And library and lighting, I think.
Library and lighting, so there is no exemption for them, did you say?
No, I'm fairly certain that the special districts, which is lighting, library, and fire, and then there's also, we would likely make some contribution to the ambulance corps. But those have not been set forth before us yet because in the interest of getting this process done first. I don't know that the school tax might be part of the pilot program.
So are you going to the IDA for a pilot?
No, we're going to negotiate directly with the town.
So the town for a
Yes.
pilot? Okay. So pilot means payment in lieu of taxes. So rather than being taxed in the same manner, for those of us who are homeowners are taxed on their property, they would establish a payment that would be paid to the town and I guess various other special districts.
And it's also in accordance with the state requirements for affordable housing organizations.
Okay.
So they give us their models, we present to the town, and then there's a negotiated payment in lieu of taxes for those regular districts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Rose, so it's 7:58. I was thinking of at some point taking a 5-minute break, just a little quick breather. So I'm thinking of maybe getting through the rows and then take a quick 5-minute break and then we'll get to the periphery. So just want to give you the heads up. So rows 3 or 4, anybody else? Yes, ma'am. I think you might be 5, but that's okay. We'll start on 4 and 5. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Antoinette Herons. I live at 111 Continental Drive in Monroe. I have been a member of the lay community of the Palatine Sisters since I'm a little girl. I'm also the director of the Vincent Pilates Center who runs the retreats. I have been a homeowner of Monroe for 56 years, and I now own a condo for a year and a half at the Cromwell Hill Commons. I'm not here to defend the Palatines. They have great representation. They don't need me. I am here to talk for the senior citizens of Monroe. When I lost my husband a year and a half ago, I wanted an apartment. I was hoping this would be, but it couldn't be. I was living in a 10-room house that I could not handle, and there was no place in Monroe that I could find an apartment on the first floor. Obviously, I can't climb steps. It's impossible for senior citizens of Monroe to stay in Monroe. I had to buy a condo, which ends up taking a lot of my funds for the future, and so I'm not here, whatever these people are saying, I understand. I was a homeowner, and for 56 years, we fought every new development that wanted to come in because we wanted it to stay the way it was when we got here. But I just want the board to consider the fact that there is no place for seniors to go. It is a desperate situation. Now, I was able to fund a condo, but I can tell you I have many senior citizens friends in Monroe that are waiting for this because they cannot fund a condo. So that's my plea.
Thank you. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. Rose 4-5. I'll come back with the perimeter. 4-5. 5-6-7. Yes, ma'am. Good evening.
My name is...
Thank
what?
you. Go ahead.
My name is Latha Reedy. I live at 95 Hawkshurst Road. I am 8 years old and go to Pine Tree Elementary, and my little brother is 6 and goes to Sapphire right by these buildings. My family moved here to Monroe in 2018 from the Bronx. We moved here for the good schools and nice neighborhoods of houses. We didn't like how crowded the city was and all the traffic and pollution. I just moved to Monroe, and it makes me sad to think of big buildings here and a lot more people and cars here. Thank you. Please love Monroe.
Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Rebecca Black, also 95 Hawkshurst Road. Like he said, we moved here because of the quiet residential rural area. We love the 1 acre and bigger lots. That's what we got, and we love that there was not traffic. I commute 4 hours a day to the city. The last thing I want is more traffic and more high-density housing when I come home to Monroe. So, you know, we did this because of the kids. We moved here for space, we moved here for quiet, and what's the price of that? Quite high taxes. I'm here from Utah, and when I tell people the taxes we pay to live in this place, they're very shocked. So now we're not only paying taxes to live here, which we're fine with because it's beautiful, but now the taxpayers are going to be subsidizing to destroy the reason we moved here. And that, to me, is simply unbelievable. So I just ask that, I think it was Mr. Manson at a previous meeting on Rye Hill said that you work for us and you were happy that we were here at the meeting. And I would just say, please work for us because the town does not want this or any high-density housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, 4, 5, 6. Yes, sir.
Hello, all. Jim Gulick, G-U-L-I-C-K, number 9 Shadowmere Road. Okie dokie. Right off the bat, that young fellow gave me an idea, actually, but I'm going to go to the CCR first. I was under the impression that those floating units were supposed to be adjacent to utilities that were there already, not that we're making new. Anyway, I sort of believe that's a terrible idea for him. And it's for the young lady that talked about not having senior citizen housing. This acreage is 80 acres roughly.
89, I believe.
We'll say
Yeah.
90 acres. We could probably put 80, 90 houses on it. Why do we need to also have, we have the 88 senior housings. That would be terrific if that had to be. But we're putting another 170 units on the same acreage where you'd have far less houses. You'd only have the 80 houses. I don't see the advantage of that at all for anybody, except for the people developing the property. The other thing I'm a little worried about and concerned is Blythea. Nice lake, well, it's shallow lake. If you go on the north end of the lake, where 20 feet away from the lake, the discharge from the north side comes into the lake, it basically runs right in. You will think it's more of a septic tank than a lake. If you go to the south side of it, the water starts to clear up a little bit. But there has to be a reason for that, and I sort of believe it's the effluent coming in. Maybe the nuns would be, I don't know, maybe we'll dredge the lake and get topsoil for the whole project there. That might alleviate some of our problems, because at times of year that lake does smell. The nuns don't smell it because they're on the far side of it. The prevailing winds come from the west, and we get that lovely aroma. Just something to think about. Thank you.
Thank you. Four, five, six. Yes, sir. Good evening.
Larry Deblinger, D-E-B-L-I-N-G-E-R, at 90 Shadowmere. I'm here to talk about Blythe Lake, which has been heavily overgrown for many years. And I've been researching it for some time. And I noticed that when Mike Morsanti was showing some documents about effluent requirements, I don't think he showed this one, which I got freely on the internet. And the title of it is Phosphorus Removal Requirements for Wastewater Discharges to Lakes and Lake Watersheds. And this is specifically because lakes don't move the water and disperse and dilute the water as much as like moving streams. Blythe Lake is a man-made lake. It's small, it's shallow. So obviously it's very vulnerable to any kind of pollution you put in it. And the point of this memorandum, which is dated 1988, 34 years ago, is that phosphorus is an extremely potent cause of aquatic overgrowth. And in here, they say the requirement should be 1 milligram per liter in effluent. I spoke with Mike in emails in the past, and he told me that the effluent, the phosphorus levels in their effluent per facility, in the two facilities, are 3.6 and 4.8. That may not sound like a lot, but it's 4 to 5 times what this document from 1988 says it should be. He also mentioned that the amount of effluent is only 2,000 gallons per day. This document says that at that low level, there is not enough, for some reason, I'm not sure, I'll see if I can find the, for discharges of 10,000 gallons per day or less, either soil or subsurface disposal should be required without chemical treatment, since the chemical addition process would be problematic due to limited operator involvement and capability. Surface water discharges should not be allowed in this flow range. Now, there's a couple of things right here, right? For over 34 years, and they've been getting DEC approvals. I call this a mystery. I don't know if any of you have any idea why that could be happening. I welcome your suggestions, you know? I mean, there's a little bit of a suggestion in this document that they put it out in 1988. It's a new, so that not every facility will be able to change and upgrade immediately. But that was 34 years ago, you know? So what's been happening? I mean, it's a mystery. It deals with the DEC, but the point is the lake is very overgrown and it has not been treated up to the correct standards.
Who, just for my information, who owns the lake? Is there a home?
The sisters do, I believe.
Okay.
But you know, I have some documents here, and one of them does indicate that all natural resources are really the property of the citizens of the state. It's like if you own it, it's kind of held in trust. You know, it's part of our environment.
Thank you. Can we get a map just of whatever the Palatine Sisters holdings are? Do we have
If you
something
take a look at the
already
existing conditions map, we should see the boundary survey on there.
of all the
It's
holdings?
pretty much, yeah, everything that's important, yeah. Should be like the second sheet. Yep, yeah, if you zoom into like where Blythea is over there. So you'll see Blythea at the top center of the screen, and then below that is the New York State DEC wetland. Right. I would note that the Queen of Apostles wastewater treatment plant actually discharges into the buffer of the DEC wetland, and it's got to circulate circuitously through that wetland before it even finds its way into Blythea Lake. Mr. Deblinger, if I could ask, who was the agency that published that document?
The DEC.
Just wanted to make sure.
Others.
You have extra copies?
I will give you.
Okay. Noreen can make copies of them and then return them to you.
That's okay. I make copies myself.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
So as this board is aware, we had a public participation plan, and the residents let me know a lot of their concerns, which I've documented and sent to the DEC. As a matter of fact, I think there was an email chain that some of the neighbors had sent to me, and to make sure that it got to them, I copied the DEC on
Yeah.
that with them.
Actually, why don't you touch upon the public participation plan that's been held? That's a result of some of the.
Sure, I'd be glad to.
Yeah.
So apparently the north side of Harriman Heights Road falls inside a zone called an environmentally disadvantaged region. Our property being on the north side of the road, it triggered this public participation plan in accordance with DEC requirements. And essentially, I'm supposed to have a video teleconference, which is a fancy name for a Zoom conference. And we were to notify all of the surrounding community within, I forget what the exact prescriptive was, 300 feet, I want to say, of the property boundaries. So we certified, return receipt mailed all those property owners that this was going to happen. I made available to the public the site plan, the reports that I prepared, the wastewater capacity report, everything that I've submitted to the DEC as it relates to the wastewater treatment plants was made available via electronic access to anybody who wanted to see what's in there. And so we logged in twice. I want to say it was the second Wednesday in August, and maybe the 4th of August. We had 2 Zoom video teleconferences, and people logged in, and they obviously you heard a majority of what their concerns were with Mr. Deblinger's presentation just now. And so he and I had discussions as it relates to nutrient loading to the lake, at which time, that was during the first meeting. So what I did was I contacted our wastewater treatment plant operator and I said, could you go do some tests for me and see what the results look like? And so what happened was on the Queen of Apostles on the south side, we ended up with a 0.07 parts per million reading for nitrogen, because that's one other important element that can impact wetlands, and the phosphorus reading was 4.84. On the St. Pat's side, we were at 0.1 parts per million for nitrogen, which again is extremely low. We were 3.68 milligrams per liter of phosphorus. I would also note the north side is a subsurface treatment system, which I believe that guidance document had suggested that flows that were below 10,000 gallons per day should be considered for. The southern plant obviously is, like we discussed before, it's an extended aeration plant. So these numbers, by the way, were given to the DEC also in an email, so they're aware of what the concerns are. One thing I brought up during that public participation plan, which was important, is the public was concerned that all of the degradation of the lake was pretty much directly attributable to these 2 wastewater treatment plants. I noted to that public during those meetings that we've never discharged less wastewater in 20 years to the lake. We were permitted and we're discharging pretty much at full capacity with the old buildings that were there. For 20 years, those buildings have been removed. There are many days that we don't even get a good flow reading from the St. Pat's facility because Little Pals isn't contributing enough flow to it. And on the south side, on the Queen of Apostles, we're on average maybe about 2,000 gallons a day, if even that. So we've been discharging at 10%, 5% of what the permitted speedies permits are allowing us to do. So I find it difficult to understand if in the last 20 years the lake has gotten worse, how could it be pinpointed to these 2 particular plants?
Yeah, I want to ask a quick question. So obviously in this watershed or sub-watershed, we have the golf course. And I guess in general, I have a question, because if there's going to be pollutant loading, certainly a golf course is a prime sink for that. So I'm just generally curious, for both sides of the street, to what extent at all does any of the golf course actually drain in the direction of the lake or the wetlands? Because in as much as I know they have their own stormwater controls and they've probably graded in a way to direct it elsewhere, I'm just wondering if it's not all getting captured and that's part of the pollutant loading.
I would suspect it's a significant part of it, quite frankly, because the side of the golf course that's adjacent to us completely drains into that New York State DEC wetland and finds its way to Blythea. That's for sure. The other side, on the northern side to the northwest, that actually drains to the Pine Tree Lake. So I think a lot of any of the nutrient loadings that you are looking at potentially to this lake are not necessarily from us, as I've noted before, but most likely from the surrounding community. I mean, I know Shadowmere area. My first project in the town of Monroe actually was off Shadowmere Road. I know the houses around that area pretty well. And when you're dealing with watershed management as it relates to lakes, you're chasing the wind a lot of times, because there's so many different point sources and non-point sources that could be contributors.
Right, if anybody's on a septic system, et cetera. But
those septic systems are pretty old and antiquated. I know quite a few of them from having done work there, and they're not far from the shorelines of this lake either.
Having said that, it's not a huge neighborhood that's next to the lake, but then again, the lake isn't a large lake either.
Correct.
To be able to, but I have, I would be curious how much of that load is coming from the golf course. you wanted to have some additional
I
comments.
just want to reiterate, when he said about the low flow that was going in, that document I just gave to you says that lower flow means it should go in the earth.
Understood, thank you.
And again, why the DEC kept approving this in violation of those standards is the mystery here.
So the lake itself isn't part of the project,
We are not impacting the lake at all.
right? No, but it's on a separate tax
Correct.
parcel, so it's not, I'm not saying there's not an impact, I'm just saying it's not part of your project
That's
site.
correct.
That's part of the application.
That's correct.
Okay. But it is owned by them, but it's owned by the sisters.
That's correct. At
Okay.
least the dam, I believe. I'm not sure about the whole lake.
Okay. Any other comments,
Yeah,
sir?
the other comment I want to make is that when you start talking about various sources of loading, I mean, the point is, why would you want to add more? Because what they're proposing is 10 to 20 or 40 times, no, about 20 times more loading into a lake that's already receiving various loading from various points and is very small. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else from 6 or 7 on this side? We're going to take a break soon. Yes, ma'am. Good evening.
Hi, my name is Carol Hawkshurst of Hawkshurst Road in Monroe. I'm a lifelong resident of Monroe, but I won't say how many years that is. Right, Jeff? We won't say that. I've been following the recorded meetings that are on the town board's website, and I want to thank you for providing an informational meeting on Pilati Village, because I feel it's very important to keep our community informed and involved in large projects such as this. Just took some notes as I was listening to people's comments, and seems like a good thing for the seniors. Just maybe some thoughts if this does go through. What about like maybe bocce ball courts or like walking trails for the seniors? I think that would be nice for them. Now, as far as the wells, the impact on residences in the area, because I know, I've been very involved with the Rye Hill Preserve proposal and concerns about that. And something that came up with that proposal, I'm thinking for this, what about with the fertilizer and pesticides that will be put down? Because when you have a big, project like that, that will impact the well water, right? I mean, I know you have stormwater management there too. Should I keep going?
Yeah, why don't you keep, and then
Okay.
we'll go through
Okay.
this.
I also know from living here my whole life and on Hawkshurst Road, I have uranium, it's very slight. I'm not glowing, but there is a slight trace of uranium, and I'm not far from this site. So I know someone asked about the water being tested. My other concern is all the buildings that are near the wetlands, all these buildings that are being put near wetlands, and the ramifications of that. Thank you. I don't know if this question was answered about the wastewater treatment system. Did you say that discharge is going to the existing wetlands? And is that not good? I don't know. I may have heard that wrong. Also, the impact on wetlands by cutting trees. That could significantly impact our wetlands. And then again, a lot of people had talked about the traffic. With all the developments that are proposed or already in place. And when you're talking about 600-plus vehicles if the Rye Hill Preserve goes through, and that's going on to Orange Turnpike, and then probably another 400 vehicles or more on the Rye Hill side. Everyone's going to be avoiding going out by Still Road and down that way. I work at the middle school in Monroe. That's the way I used to go. I avoid going down Still Road. I now, and it's, I go down Orange Turnpike, up Harriman Heights Road to go to where I work. Because the traffic is increased tremendously in the past, I would say, 5 years. And it's frustrating. So I think that was about... Oh, one other quick question was, you had mentioned that once we are ready, if this does go forward, that the traffic would be reevaluated. Did I hear that right? That it would be looked at again because of other developments going on. I may have not heard that right. So,
Well,
that's it.
so thank you. So, Mike, maybe you could touch upon the points that were raised. As far as the traffic includes the developments that, and we can bring the traffic individual or engineer up who can speak to the projects that were included in the analysis. Whenever you have a traffic study or a project, if something were to change significantly, you might ask them to revisit the traffic study, before if it hasn't been built, if it's still being evaluated, and suddenly someone was proposing some massive project, you may ask them to reevaluate it, but also you would ask that new development to obviously evaluate all the traffic from the
Right,
projects.
because that would impact
exactly.
the one that's already
they're in,
closed.
right,
Yeah,
exactly.
gotcha.
So, you want to provide some input?
We do have some area set aside on the senior side for our recreation. I don't know that we thought about bocce ball courts, but we could probably find space for that. I mean, and there are existing walking trails on both sites that are going to pretty much remain as is.
Not by the golf course, right? Because, I mean, the golf balls, that's not, I can't really sense of where this is in relation to where the golf course, is.
Yeah, sure. So our southern property line is pretty much adjacent to the golf course. There's a fence there. If you walk that fence line, you'll find the road golf ball there. I haven't seen one much past the fence line. So that's where they are. So the walking trails are actually kind of behind the parking area on the southern side, and also above the parking behind the other portion of the senior building. So the trails are not so much along the golf course side as opposed to like where the wetland is in the center of the building behind it, and to the north of that also.
I mean, even like just the walking path, because, I'm getting a little older, and I know just walking is good, and you can't walk on those roads because there's no sidewalk, so.
Twice when I've been out to this site, I've found people walking on both sites from the general community.
They shouldn't be. If they know this area, they shouldn't be.
But I have
it's
found
dangerous.
We do have, again, especially on the north side, we have lots of trails. We have some gazebos out there. A lot of that stuff is going to remain as is. As a matter of fact, we'll divine the trees, clean up some of the stone walls so it'll be more attractive.
And just to clarify, for open space, are these being set up as almost two separate projects so that the south uses the south side and the north uses the north side, or is there interplay between the two that the seniors on the south side can use whatever amenities will be on the north side?
Yes, they can. But we're also aware of the fact that seniors don't tend to travel across the double-lane street. So we do want to build recreation for them on their side. And candidly, I don't think that they're going to want to stop over there when there's a couple of hundred kids playing soccer. That being said, we do want to have both recreation on both sides. There is a community center which will be available to both of them on the north side. The seniors will sometimes use for playing cards, bingo, that kind of stuff. So that's the current intended use for that sort of thing. We do want to enhance the walking trails as much as possible. I also want to add one more time or reemphasize that we've chosen the existing footprints of the former buildings. as primarily our site, so we would not impact the wetlands and we would not impact the bucolic nature of the property. That was the original goal, as much as was possible.
And the guidelines are much stricter probably when those buildings, were put into.
Right. There's still blacktop in those areas. If someone wants to walk the site and see it, you can see that's why we're choosing that, to minimize the environmental impact.
So fertilizer and pesticide wells first, as it relates to the Rye Hill Preserve, I believe was the next comment. I can't comment for the Rye Hill Preserve project.
It made me think about it for this, like would that impact the wells?
No, we're not tied. We're significantly far enough away from the Rye Hill Preserve that they have to definitely be on a separate aquifer system than what we're on.
But are you using pesticides and fertilizers for landscaping on your own site that could impact your own wells?
Yes. Oh, okay. We potentially could be doing that. However, most of this area drains into my stormwater management facilities. Those stormwater management facilities are infiltration systems. The reason why we chose infiltration systems is because we wanted to try to recharge as much of that groundwater back into the existing groundwater supply as possible. So that fertilizer, those pesticides, a majority of it will end up in those particular systems, and there will be uptake in those stormwater systems to deal with those particular loadings.
To the point, someone had said it'd be good for the water to go into a lake before it goes into the lake. Drainage goes into stormwater ponds before they go into...
Of the lake also.
Right.
And they're going to be maintained, obviously, by somebody.
They have to be. There's a stormwater maintenance. Yep,
Yeah.
there's a stormwater maintenance
permits.
agreement between the town and the developer.
Okay.
Yep.
Was that it? I don't even...
I think that was it. You can always circle back again. Yeah. So we're going to take a 5-minute break. I think we've mostly gotten through everybody here on the right-hand side. We're going to go around the periphery as I had promised, then we'll go back to the rows and if anybody has any additional comments or questions. So let's take a 5-minute break to stretch. All right, everybody, let's get seated because we're going to start up again. The weather's starting to turn on us, so we want to start to wrap this up. Noreen, is all the submission from the last submission on the web? Okay. Who do we not have? Oh, we're missing Nick and Bob. Nick and Bob.
We're not back yet.
All right, let me get Nick and Bob.
I heard that. What?
What did you?
I wasn't talking to my mic, and I said, we're not back yet. So now he's picking on me.
All right, we're going to start up again. We said we do the periphery. Yes, why don't you come on up, Anne Marie?
I'm timing her.
And we may hold this open for comments, for you to submit comments, only because the weather's starting to get inclement. So we're going to get everybody, and then if there's more comments, I think we're going to have to take them later, because I don't want everybody driving around in bad weather. So, good evening.
Hi, I'm Anne Marie Morris, 5 Coffee Road in Monroe. I'm here as a resident, but I'm also here as a senior center director here in Monroe. And the senior center portion of, or the senior housing portion of this, the seniors talk about constantly. And they would like to know that a developer is thinking about senior housing from them. The town of Monroe is remiss in having enough senior housing for seniors. Right now, they're in the village. There is the Monroe Commons on North Main Street. And then in Harriman Woods, part of Harriman Woods is market price, I guess, apartment rentals. And then on the other half is senior sliding scale. So a lot of the seniors that come to the senior center live in one of those two, and also Lamplight Village. Senior housing doesn't bring a lot of traffic. As a matter of fact, if you have a couple, they usually have one car. If you have a single, they may have a car, and then after a while, they may not have a car. We have a dial-a-bus system that would support getting them around. They don't always have to be in a village setting. A lot of times they recommend that seniors live near a village community, as we do in the downtown, but they don't always walk around. They sometimes take the transportation instead as they age. In the beginning, it might work out where they can get around on foot, but typically, senior housing, they're not going to be driving at night. They're going to stop driving early evening. They don't like to drive at night, which is, some of them are not here tonight. They would like to be able to come to this, but they won't come out at night, and especially a night such as this where we have inclement weather. The young lady senior that spoke earlier today and talked about the difficulty finding a rental, she's absolutely right. A lot of them are house rich. So they live in a large house and they want to downsize, but where to go? So the senior component of this would be excellent. And I love the idea that somebody else had mentioned earlier about trails and bocce courts and things of that nature, because that would be a great thing to have right where you live. So if you can see someone is out there, or pickleball, which is huge, and we're actually doing pickleball courts up at Monbassia. But I just want to let you know there is, that would be a terrific component. And the traffic, it would really not impede on traffic because, as I say, 2 people would generally share 1 car. They generally speaking, would not have 2 cars. I can get a list for you of people who are interested. They are interested, and they're interested in both the market price, where they might not qualify for the, they may not qualify for the sliding scale, because some of them have pensions, and so they may not qualify for that. But there are equally a number of those that are lower income and would greatly benefit by this. And our dial-a-bus system would be able to help them get to ShopRite, get to Stop and Shop, or doctor's appointments and pharmacies. So, thank you. I just wanted to say that.
Thank you for that input. Thank you. Okay, I promise a periphery going this way. Yes, sir. Good evening.
Kevin Kivett, 65 Hawkshurst Road.
Have your last name again?
Kivett, K-I-E-V-I-T. So I don't know, I'm really here to ask or look for clarity on the CCR overlay as it pertains to this project. And mainly, everybody has some really good ideas, but I'm stuck on the housing unit quantity and how we kind of get to that number. I've done a lot of research on the town zoning regarding the CCR, including the New York State legislation, as it pertains to the planning board's ability to approve subdivisions. Again, this is clarity, so if I'm saying something that's incorrect, please clarify, and it does pertain to the project, so maybe it's something you can answer as well. Apologize, but I'm going to read this directly from the town zoning's website. As it relates to the comprehensive plan objectives achieved through the use of the CCR floating zone, one of the requirements, and it pertains to, I believe, is unit quantity. It requires the applications for subdivisions which meet a defined minimum number of proposed lots submit both a conventional and cluster development layout and allow the planning board to determine whether the cluster development must be pursued so that the town's objective for preserving undisturbed open space is met. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you've submitted is it the cluster development, or at least as part of your master development plan? So in addition to that, I think at some point, correct me if I'm wrong, a conventional subdivision plan would need to be developed to essentially determine the quantity of units allowed to be built. Again, I apologize, I'm going to read this directly from the New York State's legislation governing the town's ability to approve a cluster development, but it says here, a cluster development shall result in a permitted number of building lots or dwelling units which shall in no case exceed the number which would be permitted in the planning board's judgment if the land were subdivided into lots conforming to the minimum lot size and density requirements of the zoning ordinance or local law applicable to the district or districts in which such land is situated and conforming to all other applicable requirements. So, in my understanding of this is that at some point during the process to approve the CCR, a conventional subdivision plan would have to be provided and approved based on today's zoning, which is 1 acre zoning. And I guess the question here is...
So that's a different provision. So there is a concept called cluster development, cluster subdivisions, that you're referring to in New York State town enabling law, and we have those provisions. So that's in our code. But there's a separate part of the code that the town board adopted called the Conservation Cluster Residential Floating Zone, which in as much as it has the word cluster in it, it's not the same law. Yeah, it's
considered a subdivision?
It's different. It's not the kind of subdivision. In fact, we have subdivisions that have been in front of the town board, which is exactly as you say. You know, they've come in for a subdivision. There's a mandatory requirement to look at a cluster project. They can get no more lots than what they could get based on the zoning, the conventional zoning. This is a proposed rezoning of the site to a concept called Conservation Cluster Residential Floating Zone, which has its own regulations. It's different.
Including density?
Different density requirements. It's in 5794. I have it up here.
Number 5, if you go to that, Bonnie.
Number 5.
Yeah.
here.
It's basically 1 unit for every half acre. We have 89 acres, so you essentially take 89 and multiply it by 2, and that's where you get 178 units from. So that's how we arrived at the density.
Is that density, or is?
That's the density.
That's
So
correct, yeah.
they can't have more than two dwelling units for every acre.
Correct.
Right. And so you have about 89 acres.
That's correct.
And you have about 170, not about, you have 178
178.
dwelling units.
Rounding down, yes.
Right.
Does that mean literally half acre gets a unit?
Well,
That's correct.
Yes.
Yes. It's another way of saying the same thing.
A half acre is what gives you the count of the number of units that would be allowed on the particular property. But what CCR does, the purpose of it is, it's a trade-off. So, as you said, normally this land would be 1 unit per acre, correct? And we would look at it under the regulations that you researched, and well done on that you looked into all of that stuff because it's somewhat complex. Under the CCR, when that was created, the laws that you were reading originally came out of, there was a moratorium, there were new zoning laws created at the end of 2017. CCR came about 2020. It's a later concept, it's a later law after what you were reading in our current code. So what CCR is, it's a trade-off. It says, if you preserve so much land, then you can get more units than you would have gotten under the traditional zoning. So by preserving 65% or more of the land that is part of this floating zone, if indeed it is landed anywhere, then you get to build not 1 unit per every acre, but 1 unit per every half acre. So the benefits are this. Obviously, preserving 65% of the land untouched is quite a bit of preservation. Whereas in the normal conventional plan, land throughout the 80-something acres would have been cleared of trees, would have been a network of roads, would have been a network of all those things. So for the developer, in exchange for this preservation of this land that they own and not developing that, they get to build more units than they would in that conventional plan that you were reading about.
Completely understand, yeah. I'm not against, I'm in the industry, so I understand. It's just can we just throw a number at it and it goes through the process and gets accepted, or is it later down the road because there's a lot of checkoffs, correct, to kind of get to a point where this is applied to this project? And so at some point, is there any kind of review of a site plan that may reduce the quantity of units based on everything we talked about?
Yeah, that's this part of the process. So we're going through the environmental review process. If there is something that is a significant adverse impact that cannot be mitigated, it may mean that reduction, it may mean a change in the layout, but that's part of the process right now.
So a conventional subdivision plan doesn't play into the approval of?
No,
Not at all.
not for this.
So ultimately with CCR, what will happen is, and now we've been working on this application, it was first before us January of 2021, if my notes were correct. So we've been working on this almost 2 years. Ultimately, once we're done with the environmental review, there'll be recommendations to the town board. We've been working on perfecting this site plan and this project along with the developer to come up with the best possible solution, and that with our recommendations will go before the town board. If the town board at that point decides to accept the master development plan, they will be setting the number of units that are allowed as part of the process. So our recommendations will play into that, the environmental review, everything we've done working back and forth with Mike and the developers, all ultimately play into what ultimately will be decided by a vote of the town board to land the CCR, accept the master development plan, and set the yield count and all of those good things. So yes, it is. It's very much part of the process.
Okay, I was just curious. I was here for information.
Yeah, no, it's great.
Researched this. I just needed clarification. Thank you. That's all I have. Oh, one last question. I guess this was just tacked on as I was listening to everybody's comments. Is the soccer field included as part of the conservation, or is it? I would assume so.
Actually, I have to double check that. I'm not sure.
Was
I don't. The soccer field is not included, I don't believe, in the open space calculations, no.
So then can I just, based on my research, it doesn't sound like that's conserving. It would have to be within your 36%, 34%. That's just my.
I believe we have 66% on
Concern.
the south side, and I think we have like 81 or 2% on the north side. So we are in excess of what's required on the north side by 17%, and that's excluding the soccer field. So we're conserving an extreme amount of land on the north side and the south side for that fact.
I just didn't know if the soccer field was permitted to be constructed as part of the conservation or not.
It's a great question.
I don't believe it is, but that's my opinion. And then to tack it on to somebody else, I'm sorry I ran past my 4 minutes. I guess consider the noise from a bunch of kids playing soccer with senior living. I mean, that's just an opinion.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone at the periphery? Yes, ma'am. Hi.
My name is Marianola Liga, and I live at 16 Reynolds Road. Liga. I just want to say I do have, after hearing and seeing the people involved in the project, I do have some confidence and some faith that this is a good idea, as long as we make sure that, we don't contaminate the water and, everything else everybody else spoke about. I just was going to say, is the project in Nanuet similar to this project so that we can compare if we were to go take a tour?
Yes.
Where is it again, the address, location?
We built a project with the Sisters of Charity, the same development team in Nanuet, New York, about the same scale as this and somewhat similar design. And we'd be happy to host a tour for those interested parties later on. So,
what's the address?
I think it's on Convent Road. Is it 196 Convent Road, named after the former convent that was there in Nanuet, New York. Vincent's Village is the name of the complex. And just so you know, the name of this, Pilati Village, is named after the founding saint of these Palatine sisters.
I was trying to find it for you, but.
I also have a question. I have a concern. Does granting CCR zoning for this project or any other project have, does it set a precedent for granting zoning in other projects that may not be as good for the community as this?
So in other words, if the town approves it for this site, does that mean they have to approve it for another site?
Yeah, is the other site's going to come in and say, well, you let them do it, so you have to let us do it?
No, because it's, and maybe Ashley can speak to this, our attorney, but you have to meet certain credentials, certain qualifications, but each individual development is a separate zone change that the town board has to approve. That's at their discretion. And based on the uniqueness of each of those properties and locations and what the applicant is proposing, the town board may decide differently for another site that they don't like the layout or the, et cetera. So I don't know if you want to touch upon that or. Okay. But I think the important thing is the town board has discretion. It's a zoning action, so they don't have to approve it.
Yes, that's correct. It's in the town's discretion, just as if it were any other zone change that they were considering outside of this floating type of district.
Okay.
And in addition, there is the certain criteria that even to qualify for this type of zoning, it has to be within certain distance from a village, it has to have a certain amount of acreage, so there are things that just rule out a lot of properties based on that alone.
And only certain parcels in the town, when the law was created, are even under consideration for the possibility of having a CCR zone project landed there. Anything that is not one of those enumerated parcels cannot get the floating zone unless the law would be changed.
Thank you. I also, of course, I am concerned about the traffic, but saying that I am favorable to having the senior housing. And I'm very happy that the sisters are going to be managing that as well. So those are two really good points. And I know Mike, and he's a very conscientious person and engineer. So I have faith in that. Could we, if possible, make more walking trails? I've gone to the senior housing in South Jersey, where my late mom-in-law used to live, and it could be very beautiful, very peaceful, no traffic. So how are we going to develop this so that it is actually nice for the seniors to walk, and then it's nice for us to walk, because like the roads around my house, like right in front of my house, there's nowhere to walk. I mean, there's like a little strip between me and the cars, and it's like I would not recommend walking or anything like that. But I would love to have a sidewalk so that I could walk. I would love that, but I don't have it. So, and that's it.
Thank you. We'll certainly be looking into trails and what we have and what we can do.
Yes.
Over here, I think there was another hand raised.
Hi, my name is Maureen Richardson. I live on Harriman Heights Road in Monroe. I have always lived on Harriman Heights Road in Monroe. I actually went to Little Palace Preschool, and I think that some of the nuns who taught me how to read are the same people who, they may have passed away by now, but probably the same community of people we're talking about tonight. And I also volunteered and went to St. Anastasia's program, and so any character defect I have, you can blame the nuns. They did teach me to speak my mind, though, so that's probably why we're all here tonight, is we're a community, we all have different concerns, and in no way is my criticism of any part of this project saying that the seniors don't desperately need services and a place to go in Monroe, and I don't think that that's up for debate. We desperately need senior housing. What I look at when I see this project, and what strikes me the most, is that we're at the intersection of profit and environmental welfare, where the Palatine Sisters or the Catholic Charities community is trying to sustain itself, expand, provide services, and make money, and do so in a way that could benefit the community. But when I look at it, the plans, just preliminarily, it just looks to me like we have natural buffers, wetlands, and maybe we've expanded out those natural buffers to be fitting the 65% requirement, the minimum requirement for CCR zoning. But to me, it doesn't strike me, maybe there's another map missing online, that there's like a large swath of open space. It just looks like a plan that we needed senior housing, and then we may have amped up the density to maximize the most profit for the acreage sustainable. And my question and Preserve Monroe's question is always going to be, is this sustainable? I will email you guys the nitty gritty of, because I could go on and on about all the details that people did with traffic. I've watched, it's a miracle I'm alive, you know, like living on Harriman Heights, it's like the ocean. There's a deadly calm, and then there's a car that goes 90 miles an hour and can take out your mailbox and flip over your rock wall and wind up in your neighbor's, you know, lawn in the middle of the night. And half of those are drunk drivers, unpoliced, because we rely on the state police. So I would hate to see senior citizens with walkers or, you know, soccer ball kicking kids running around on Harriman Heights Road without any plan for, you know, speed action on that area. It's very dangerous. I would also ask if there's anything that this community could do to raise volunteership or the resources for the volunteers who are the EMTs, who it takes a half hour for them to get to Harriman Heights Road when someone is in deadly distress. That's been an experience repeatedly with me and my mother, who had passed from breast cancer. And that trip to the hospital from, I'm very nearby, we were able to walk actually to Little Palace back then before it got too dangerous, would take a half an hour to get to Good Samaritan. So I think my motivation in looking at this before realizing that the sisters were the ones going to be responsible and taking ownership and liability and care, that's a big reassurance, and I will be going to look at your prior examples, because it's just, we want to know that our seniors in our community are being taken care of by a reputable company, because I think we all saw stories during COVID of like what senior living and what could become, the horror stories of what could happen during like periods of isolation and health concerns. So my biggest concern again is just, we should be as a community mandating natural buffers, mandating certain landscaping anyway, and to call the density that we're getting here, it's borderline for me. I want something for the seniors, but does it make sense? And again, I'll just email the nitty gritties, but it is a project close to everybody's heart, and especially mine, because I live on Harriman Heights, and it's just a meaningful thing to walk by that property and see the trees and the grass and the open space, and that's all we want. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, at this point, I'm just gonna ask if anyone who has not raised a comment wants to come up. Otherwise, I think we'll afford additional opportunity for people to submit comments written, only because I'm concerned about the roads. It has started sleeting. Does anybody have comments that they have not raised at this point? All right. Thank you very much for attending. We really appreciate all the comments we received. We're going to continue the process. We may ask for some additional information and insights as we, get to completion on this. So thank you very much. With that, it is late. It is inclement weather, so we're going to skip the meeting minutes for this evening. And if there's no other business, I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
May I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any noes, abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you very much.